The 911 call is steady. The voice says, "My husband's not breathing," while the camera, if you could see it, would pan across a living room lacquered in blood. The bodies on the floor, the furniture unbroken, the safe intact. Carved into his chest, a symbol no neighbor would recognize. She doesn't describe it. She doesn't ask how to help him. She follows a script. The real question isn't who killed him, it's who the message was for. Because this isn't a random home invasion, it's governance by fear. And the first clue we missed was hiding in her calm. Start with the victim. Mid-40s, predictable routines, community fixture, low-risk lifestyle. If you were building a profile of someone unlikely to meet violence at home, he fit. He left early, returned on schedule, paid bills on time, waved to neighbors, and kept nothing resembling a double life. That's important, because when people like this die violently, the simplest explanation is proximity. Someone they know, someone they love, or someone who wants to punish both. Discovery began at 7:13 p.m. with that measured 911 call. Responders arrived fast. No forced entry on the main door. Backslider secured from the inside. A window latch showed cosmetic damage, but the glass carried dust undisturbed along the inner track. If entry had been made there, movement should have disturbed the dust. It didn't. The forced entry was theater. The scene spoke two languages: overkill and control. Blunt trauma to the head, compliance. Restraint marks on wrists, containment. Stab wounds that increase in force, escalation under discipline. Then the symbol. Carved with intent, spaced evenly, cut post-mortem to prevent excessive bleeding. Someone knew exactly how much violence to stage without ruining the message. Contradictions piled up. A drawer of costume jewelry dumped but not taken. A laptop left on the counter, asleep, fingerprints wiped. A small safe in the office untouched, yet an imprint of another, smaller safe on the carpet in the bedroom closet, recently removed. Valuable items sat within reach, but items without resale value were missing. A worn leather pouch, an old cable coiled with a rubber band, a blank notebook with impressions pressed through multiple pages. Not trophies, targets. Early hypotheses split. Staged burglary versus intimate partner homicide. The wife's calm pushes you toward her, but the signature pushes you away from local offenders. If this were domestic, we'd expect messy staging, panic, and a clumsy narrative. What we saw was a clean bypass, controlled aggression, and a ritual mark designed to travel. The mark is the method of speech. Who would the message be for, if not the wife? Time of death estimates narrowed to a 2-hour window before the call, based on body temperature and stomach contents. The thermostat had been adjusted down 2 degrees, an old trick to stretch the window, but the home's smart system logged the change. Someone lingered after. The crime wasn't a flash event. It was a visit with an agenda. Blood told its own story. Cast off on the wall, consistent with a hand guiding the blade, not flailing. Drip patterns doubled back toward the hallway, then stopped at a rag with diluted traces. Cleanup aborted, or cleanup carefully limited to hide touch points while preserving the message. If you believe in coincidence, you miss the pattern. The offender moved with cold calculation. They knew where to avoid cameras. They knew the rhythm of the neighborhood. They knew whose absence mattered. Neighbors reported nothing unusual, until we ask with specificity. A car idled without headlights 2 nights earlier. A package left at the wrong address. A knock that turned into silence when footsteps approached. Anomalies are the breadcrumbs you only see after you know where to look. Alone, they're noise. Together, they're an approach vector. The wife's account was precise but bloodless. I left at 6 for groceries. He was watching TV. I found him on the floor. She never asked for instructions on compressions. She avoided describing the carving. Some people freeze, others dissociate, and some perform a practiced calm built over years of living inside risk. The question isn't whether she killed him. It's whether the murderer killed him for her. We treat the mind like a locked box. To open it, you don't brute force the lid. You test combinations, MO, signature, motive. The MO here, quiet entry, initial blunt force, controlled restraint, escalated stabbing, symbol carved last, limited cleanup, stage disorder, targeted removal of low-value items. The signature, the symbol itself, executed with care, intended as a warning that survives conversation. The motive, that's the last combination. If it clicks, the whole lid opens. Let's interrogate the burglary narrative. Why simulate forced entry poorly? To create plausible deniability without risking evidence. Why ignore valuables? Because the objective wasn't profit. Why remove an old pouch and cable? Because the objective was retrieval, a message and a missing object. Those two together form a pattern we've seen when organized groups enforce discipline at distance, punish the loved one, reclaim the leverage item, and leave a mark that broadcasts policy. Consider the husband's profile one more time. No gambling debts, no affairs, no business disputes. Every path to a personal motive runs cold. That emptiness is itself a clue. If he isn't the target, then he is the medium. Pain as memo. The home is bulletin board, the symbol is letterhead. We catalog evidence, fibers at the restraints, a partial shoe print with a worn heel on the threshold, and a faint scent of industrial cleaner that doesn't match products under the sink. Mixed instruments suggest the offender brought tools, but used household items strategically to muddy the trail. Professional enough to plan, careful enough to stay. What breaks cases like this is alignment. Scene logic, victimology, and behavioral signatures must point to the same offender class. Here, they converge on an external actor with inside knowledge, which brings us from the scene to the suspect's profile. Who had a reason to speak through a body, trusted the wife to hear it, and believed fear would move her faster than grief? The trail out of this living room leads backward into a past designed to disappear. On paper, she is unremarkable. Married 6 years, administrative job at a medical office with predictable hours. Sparse social footprint, a private account with a handful of coworkers, a birthday post every year featuring the same grocery store cake, captions that read like placeholders. No political noise, no travel boasts, no late-night photos. You could miss her even while looking. Her behavioral baseline forms quickly. In interviews, she sits straight, chin level, hands nested. She doesn't over-explain. Answers land in neat parcels, who, where, when, with clean edges. It reads, composed rather than cold. Composure isn't guilt, it's management. But management leaves seams. We start with time. She leaves for groceries at 6. The receipt prints at 6:21. The store is 8 minutes away by the shortest route. She returns at 7:07, calls at 7:30. The gaps aren't fatal, but they glow. A left turn she didn't need to make adds 2 minutes. A brief stop on a side street, caught by a neighborhood camera, adds another 3. When asked, she says she hit a red light. The light at that intersection doesn't have a red phase that long. Microtells are small bends in ordinary facts. She forgets whether she bought milk but recalls the brand of batteries. She describes the cashier's tattoo in detail, but can't name the aisle where she found the bread she buys every week. Memory under stress is messy, yes, but her mess is curated. The mundane slips, the peripheral gleams. That's classic cognitive load. When you're balancing the visible story against an invisible one, small things fall. Financials offer another angle. Her bank accounts are clean. There's a regular payroll deposit, utilities on auto pay, a modest savings cushion. But outside the bank, money moves differently. Prepaid cards bought with cash, topped up in round numbers. ATM withdrawals just under reporting thresholds. The pattern isn't criminal by itself. It's a risk management strategy. People living under pressure hold back a layer, currency you can carry without leaving a clean line. Phones tell their own truths. She presents one. It's consistent with her billing. But her network metadata shows a second IME pairing to her Apple ID months ago. Then, vanishing. Duplicate phones often appear in domestic abuse cases, in affairs, in side hustles, or in lives that require compartments. We find traces of ghost apps, programs installed and uninstalled within hours, their residue a faint smear in the update log. Their function, encrypted messaging, low-noise communication, disappearing notes. Before marriage, her footprint scatters. Short-term leases that never extend a full year. Gym memberships that start in January and end by spring, then resume in a new zip code. Employment stints in roles that verify but don't root. Front desk, temp clerical, hospitality. Friends who describe her as kind, a good listener, but never the initiator of plans. She's a person who touches down and lifts off with the seasons. A person who edits her life to minimize attachments that can be traced. Her language is tells. In the interview, she uses the phrase, "keeping my head down," 3 times. She says, "safe routes," when describing familiar roads. She says, "clean phone," when asked if she texted from the store. Most people say, "my phone." She reaches for terms born in communities where scrutiny is a constant. That doesn't make her violent. It makes her trained. At work, supervisors say she never took vacation, preferred early shifts, and volunteered for tasks that kept her behind a screen. Co-workers recall she carried 2 bags, a tote and a smaller pouch she never let out of reach. The pouch isn't in the house now. A colleague remembers she once left it in the break room, realized after 2 minutes, and went pale before sprinting back. No one saw inside. She offers grief in controlled releases. A single tear on cue when an empathetic question lands. A breath caught on the word husband, then smoothed away. You could call it flat effect, but that flattens the truth. This is scaled emotion, rationed in public to preserve fuel for later. People who have lived with chronic threat conserve. They pace themselves. They do not spill. We test the edges with benign inconsistencies. Ask her to walk us through the house as she left it. She mentions the porch light timer, the door chime, the way the dog hair collects along the baseboards. She misses the moved rug corner that any non-stress partner might miss too, except she notices everything else. When we circle back, she corrects herself before we raise it. That's a rehearsal tell. She is anticipating audit. Social ties are thin by design. 2 gym friends, both recent. An elderly neighbor she helps with groceries. No deep family ties in the area. Her emergency contact at work is listed as a cousin whose number forwards to a prepaid voicemail. When we attempt to reach them, it never picks up live. The cousin exists on paper. Paper is easy. All of this could be the life of someone private, or the life of someone who believes privacy is survival. The distinction matters, because a private person avoids noise. A survivor avoids patterns. Yet her life is a pattern. Short leases, duplicate phones, cache buffers, rotating gyms, narrow social bandwidth, low travel visibility, layered vocabulary. That isn't shyness. That's architecture. Which brings us to a seam that doesn't line up. Her story of how they met. She says a coffee shop, a spilled drink, a shared laugh. He told friends about meeting through a coworker at a hardware store. The coworker confirms his version. When we ask her about the hardware store, she says, "Right, I forgot that part." People forget details, but origin stories are identity anchors. When they wobble, it's not memory, it's design. A stable life with seams that don't line up is still a seam, and seams are where you pull. Now, let's look at the mechanics of the crime. The injuries form a rhythm, controlled, deliberate, then ritual. Wound sequencing matters because it shows intention. First, a blunt strike delivered from behind the right ear, consistent with a short-handled object used to compromise balance without fracturing the skull. compliance, not chaos. Then, restraint, linear abrasions at the wrists with parallel micro tears, indicating a synthetic cord tightened gradually, released, then tightened again. That stop-start tension is a behavioral tell. Someone practiced at modulating pain to manage a subject's compliance arc. Stab wounds escalate in depth and angle over time. Early thrusts are measured shallow, avoiding vital organs, then deepening toward the end. That's not frenzy. That's a controlled ramp designed to extract time. The spacing between wounds is consistent across the torso, handspans measured, not random jabs. You can hear the metronome in it. Whoever did this counted. When you count, you're not losing control, you're administering it. The symbol carved last is clean-lined, shallow, and done post-mortem. The margins lack active bleeding. There's pooling beneath the body inconsistent with carving during life. The offender knew to deliver the message without distorting it with blood. That precision aligns with offenders who treat the mark as a brand. Communication that must be legible when photographed, legible when described. This is signature, not MO. The method of death could vary. The symbol cannot. It's how the killer signs policy. Blood spatter analysis confirms the choreography. We see medium velocity impact spatter near the initial strike location. Then, a reduction as restraint takes effect. Cast-off arcs on the wall align with a controlled wrist motion rather than a full arm swing. Shorter radius, consistent droplet size. Along the hallway, drip trails stagger forward, then double back toward the living room. That reversal is important. It suggests the offender moved away, realized a missed step, an item, a light, a surface, and returned to correct the environment. Not panic. A reset. Cleanup attempts are selective. A faint haze of diluted hemoglobin on the doorknob, and the remote control suggests a gloved hand slipped, then wiped with a cloth dampened in a cleaning agent not present in the home. The scent carries ammoniac notes more common to commercial mixes. Surfaces of little evidentiary value, bookshelves, picture frames, remain dusty. High-touch zones read recently swabbed. The objective wasn't to sanitize the scene, it was to erase trace risk while preserving the performance. Tool signatures tell another story. The blunt injury tool leaves a compression pattern consistent with a rubberized grip. Oval micro-impressions on skin suggest a textured handle, not a smooth household hammer. The cutting instrument varies. Some wounds display micro-serrations along the margins. Others are clean-edged. That points to mixed implements, likely a brought knife for the primary assault, then a smaller, potentially household blade leveraged for the carving to ensure precise control. This mix complicates trace recovery. It also indicates caution. Professionals separate tools by task to manage transfer. Time of death narrows further when we align thermal decay with gastric contents and the home's climate log. The thermostat dip creates a deceptive curve, but peripheral indicators correct it. The sclera dehydration rim, the slight lividity shift at the lower back, and the early rigor in the masseter muscles cluster around a narrow interval. The change in thermostat registered after the likely time of death, implying the offender lingered, then cooled the house. Time was part of the plan. A lingering offender is confident or protected. Scene logic makes sense through that lens. Restraints applied where the victim would feel watched, the living room. Furniture undisturbed because struggle was minimized. The remote placed within reach but unused. Television light becomes ambient cover for activity. A rug corner turned up, not from panic, but from kneeling in a fixed position while carving. The offender manages optics. If neighbors glance in, they see TV glow. If investigators arrive, they see an intact set, a disrupted human, and a message that refuses ambiguity. We test local offender databases for comparable violence. The MO doesn't match neighborhood burglaries gone wrong. Those are short, sloppy, loud. It doesn't mirror domestic escalations. Those tend to peak early, not stretch. Signature work like this travels by network. The symbol's geometry, 3 strokes in a fixed order, a notch at the lower angle, recurs in older photos from other jurisdictions. Not many, just enough to suggest a portable ritual used by a small cadre rather than a broad gang tag sprayed on walls. Fibers from the restraints add texture. The weave points to a paracord variant, but one thread carries an unusual polymer finish used in marine-grade stock. That aligns with an offender familiar with dockside suppliers or with a buyer who prioritizes durability over convenience. The partial shoe print by the threshold shows a worn heel with an asymmetrical edge, habitual pronation, a gait issue that narrows candidates without naming one. These are breadcrumbs, small but directional. So, the pattern: controlled entry, compliance strike, restraint with incremental tightening, staged escalation, post-mortem. Symbol: selective cleanup, environmental reset, targeted retrieval. The violence wasn't the goal. It was the delivery system. The truth was worse. The body is the broadcast tower. And the broadcast is policy, deterrence made visible. When you see ritual marks like this, you're not just solving a murder, you're reading governance, which brings us back to her. If this signature is imported, someone believed she'd understand it. That's a bridge from the blood to her past. The mechanics say professional. The message says network. And networks don't stop at the door. They follow the pattern all the way to the person the pattern was built to move. If the scene is the broadcast, the devices are the relay. We start with her phone metadata. Silent hours appear like stitched seams. Every night from 2:12 to 2:27 a.m., push notifications mute, background refresh pauses, and the device pings a tower 1 sector over from her home. That's odd. Sleep mode wouldn't shift sectors. Tower drift can explain some movement, but not a repeated pattern at the same minute mark across months. Someone taught her to create dead air. Routing anomalies amplify the pattern. Routine calls take the shortest path, but several outbound texts route through a relay service that obfuscates origin for a fraction of a second. You'd miss it in casual review. In aggregate, it's a technique common to ghost apps that borrow legitimate notification lanes to send encrypted payloads. We don't see content. We see the bones of the method, a heartbeat that isn't supposed to be there. Her Wi-Fi history tells us how the house breathes. Smart bulbs cycle at precise intervals. 3:03, 3:07, 3:11 a.m. Low, high, low, like signal shutters. The thermostat logs a microburst of manual input at 4:19 a.m. on 3 non-consecutive Wednesdays, a time no one should be awake. The door camera reconnects to the network 8 minutes after those bursts, not before. That suggests local jamming or a deliberate offline window to mask a device handshake. If you're training yourself to go dark, you practice with innocuous systems first. GPS history is mostly dull by design: work, home, grocery, gym. But the map has holes. Dead zones recur near an industrial strip that hosts 4 self-storage facilities and a salvage yard. Her device goes silent for 36 to 42 minutes, then reappears half a mile east. Satellite drift doesn't produce clean blocks like that. Manual toggling does. She drives loops along a route with multiple exits, then parks in blind pockets, always under an hour, always mid-afternoon on weekdays. Consistent laps are nerves made visible. Search logs reveal coded phrasing. She doesn't type "how to disappear." She types "long-haul travel without bank trail," "clean number change without carrier store," "ID stack renewal schedule." She asks for safe routes north in winter and coastal bus cash ticket policy. None of this is illegal. Taken together, it's a curriculum: survival, flight, alias maintenance. Skills you keep sharp when you believe pursuit is policy, not a possibility. Her financial tech mirrors that posture. Payroll hits a legitimate bank, but parallel activity lives in prepaid ecosystems. Cards purchased with cash at different chain stores, loaded in round amounts, used for gas at out-of-the-way stations, and nothing else. Crypto remnants appear in a wallet created years back, now dormant, with small test transfers in the weeks before the murder. Off-ramp timing matters. She initiates a conversion to fiat, then never completes the withdrawal. It's like she reached for a parachute and froze. We widen the circle to shared devices. The smart speaker logs generic commands, but once, 2 months ago, it fails to understand set a ghost reminder. That phrase doesn't belong in a domestic space. The TV's streaming account shows a burst of foreign crime documentaries focused on witness protection failures and organized enforcement rituals. People watch strange things for stranger reasons, yes, but this binge aligns with a spike in her silent hour pattern. Anxiety has a footprint. Her car's infotainment logs a single-paired device not presented to us, an older model with a MAC address that pings only during those industrial strip visits. It uses randomized identifiers, but the Bluetooth signature reveals a manufacturer year that doesn't match anything in the home. A duplicate phone lived in her orbit. It surfaced only in the places where she vanished digitally. We examined the home Wi-Fi for hidden clients, a device with no name, connecting under a cloned thermostat identity, draws trickle power from the network twice a week, midnight hour. Its traffic volume is tiny, but the timing lines up with the light cycles. A covert dongle or a low-profile bridge could piggyback here. If you expect to run again, you plant tools in your own house the way you stash cash. Quiet contingencies. Email metadata carries another strand. A throwaway account created years earlier forwards to her main, but only messages with single emoji subjects, black spade, red diamond, white circle, pass through. The symbol carved into her husband's chest shares geometry with a diamond variant. She never replies. She archives. Non-response is response when the sender watches your silence. We pull cell tower dumps around the murder window. One device with a coastal area code moves through the neighborhood, connects briefly to a cafe guest network down the block, and vanishes. The same device appears months prior within the dead zone near the storage corridor, then not again until the week of the killing. It travels light, never pairing, never lingering longer than necessary. That's the shadow orbit of a courier or a watcher. So what does the data trail say? She built a life to vanish on command. She practiced going dark, rehearsed routes, kept money she could fold into a pocket, and maintained channels that carry more meaning than words. The digital noise around the house in the weeks before the murder, cycles, jams, off-hours adjustments, reads like pressure testing. Something was coming through, probing for weakness or confirming readiness. The truth is in the cadence. Devices don't lie about tempo. Her tempo changed before the blood. It tightened, then stuttered. The symbol didn't arrive out of nowhere. The network warmed the room first. And if the pattern points anywhere, it points toward a past that was never gone, only dormant, waiting for the right combination to wake it. As the door closed behind her on interview day 3, the warrant team rolled to the industrial strip that kept swallowing her GPS. Storage facilities sell anonymity as convenience. Climate-controlled lockers, month-to-month leases. IDs glanced at, not studied. We had a unit number by triangulation and a manager who preferred paperwork to questions. Controlled entry, cataloged inventory, no theatrics. The lock shank cut with a clean bite. The roll-up door groaned like a throat clearing. Inside, a grid of order. Plastic bins labeled in block letters, not names. Kits, clothing, docks, tools. A garment rack with neutral jackets grouped by length. Wigs on foam heads, hairstyles spanning 10 years of trends without committing to any. A metal cash box duct-taped under a shelf, wrapped in wax paper. Cash bands sorted by denomination, rubber aging to a matchstick. A manual for living off-grid sat on top of the first bin. pages dog-eared at chapters on water caching and travel cover stories. You don't buy this for fun, you study it to survive. We photographed before touch, then gloved hands moved slow. Burner IDs in a felt pouch, 2 states, 1 foreign, all convincing at a glance. Names that share initials to ease muscle memory. The lamination quality screamed professional, not novelty. Next to them, a narrow notebook, pages scored with heavy pressure. Under oblique light, impressions surfaced, dates, crossings, and a symbol sketched over and over until the hand learned it. The same geometry carved into her husband. Photographs told the quieter truth. A younger version of her, hair 2 shades darker, posture already measured. She stood between men who turned their faces away from the lens, shoulders visible, hands tucked, one man's ring a distinctive wide band etched with a line, practical jewelry that doubles as a code. Locations looked like back rooms, exposed conduit, stained tile, a calendar stuck on June with no year. In each, the same small confidence in her stance. She belonged enough to be overlooked. Maps lay folded in a battered envelope. Cities marked not with stars but with caution circles, safe routes sketched along bus lines, alley cuts, and service roads behind shopping centers. Margins bore notes in her hand, times to avoid, storefronts with no cameras, clinics that took cash, old crime hotspots dotted in a different ink, clustered near docks, bridges, and club districts. These weren't tourist maps. They were extraction plans. Then, the ledger. Black cover, spine cracked, filled with names written in code, 2-letter sigils paired with numbers and small shapes. Next to a subset, the recurring symbol appears, tiny, in pencil. It matches the body down to the notch at the lower angle. Some entries are crossed out. Others carry arrows to city abbreviations. A pattern emerges. Sigils migrate with her trail. The mark isn't random art. It's a property tag and a warning, traveling with accounts owed. We logged a cable coiled in a cloth wrap, obsolete, thick, with a proprietary connector out of fashion a decade ago. The same profile as the missing old cable from the house list. Nearby, a leather pouch with a darker rectangle on the lining where a device used to sit. The imprint size matched a compact recorder model discontinued years back. The decoy safe at the house stayed untouched. Here, the real safe had lived in parts, cable, pouch, and empty space where leverage should be. Under the bottom bin, a single keycard in a mylar sleeve, hotel branding scraped, mag stripe intact, taped to it a sliver of paper with a time, 4:19. That time has echoed in her home logs, the thermostat microbursts that made no sense. The same minute across systems. That's how disciplined people anchor habits. One number to rule the calendar. We bagged everything, but one thing didn't fit the grid. A Polaroid, colors leached, edges feathering. She's on a pier at night, wind lifting hair across her mouth, eyes off camera, laughing. Not the rationed half-smile we knew. On the back, a penciled phrase, clean route or clean slate. Choose. The handwriting didn't match hers. Directive as affection. Affection as leverage. The manager confirmed the rental history. The unit opened under a name that cross-referenced to one of her alias patterns, paid in cash, renewed irregularly, sometimes early, sometimes last minute, never with a card. Cameras covered the hall, but not the door. That's policy here, which is why people like her choose it. Back at the lab, we developed latent prints. Most belonged to her. A partial that wasn't hers appeared on the mylar sleeve, and the cable cloth, ridge detail sufficient for a search. The polymer fiber from the restraints at the house matched a tiny snag in the cloth wrap. That ties the locker to the scene, not in theory, but in transfer. The cable was handled near the time of the murder. Whether by her or by someone reaching through her world depends on who has the other half of the print. We cross-reference the ledger sigils with border hits and bail skips. A cluster of initials matches names whispered in dockside cases from years back: handlers, couriers, debt collectors. The ledger isn't a diary, it's a memory palace. Who owes? Who handles? Which city holds what kind of danger? And threaded through, the symbol acts as a status marker: debt upgraded to discipline. The storage unit is the first physical break because it collapses the distance between her curated present and the coded past. Wigs for slipping sightings, cash for quiet exits, maps to avoid cameras, a cable to wake an old recorder, a ledger that translates the mark from art to governance. The present murder wasn't random, it was the past catching up with paperwork. Moving from the scene to the suspect's profile, the symbol stops being mystery and becomes policy with her name penciled in the margins. Moving from the storage unit to the identity beneath it, we start with aliases as breadcrumbs. Each name carries shared initials, birth dates shifted by one digit, and addresses tied to short leases near interstates. When we cross-reference those identities against border hits and bench warrants, a pattern forms along coastal cities with heavy cash economies. The same woman registers across years as a front desk clerk, a cocktail server, a night shift receptionist, roles with proximity to money and movement. None last long. When heat spikes, she relocates before questions turn formal. The first solid image comes from an old arrest photo buried in a municipal archive, sealed after a clerical error. Hairline altered by a rough cut, brows thinner, but the eyes are identical. Same slight downward tilt at the outer corners, same asymmetry under the left lid. The arrest reads, "Disturbance, no conviction." The context matters more than the charge. She was picked up outside a club that later surfaced in an extortion probe. The club's back office shared a wall with a payday lender. That overlap is a classic ecosystem for debt collection crews. We map incident clusters around her documented stops: extortion complaints with reluctant victims, debt collection visits that ended in missing persons reports. Not many, and rarely solved. The frequency rises near docks, where containers bring goods and unreported labor meets cash-only nightlife. Clubs become fronts where information travels faster than invoices. If you're a courier with ears, you carry more than parcels. You carry conversations. Regional patterns align. The same symbol that cut her husband appears discreetly in older crime scene photos from a different jurisdiction, etched into a bar table under poor lighting, traced in grease on a freight door, carved shallow on the shoulder of a victim who survived long enough to refuse cooperation. You don't get graffiti like this without intent. It isn't swagger. It's a quiet logo that means property and penalty inside a compartmentalized network. Within that structure, her probable role emerges. Early on, she moved as a runner, handing off envelopes, collecting IOUs, writing passenger in cars that never parked in front. Later, her photos suggest proximity to conversations above her pay grade, visible but ignored, pouring drinks while men negotiated insurance for businesses that didn't need it until they did. That shift, from runner to lure, tracks with networks that weaponize trust. You place someone disarming in rooms, then you listen. Why does a courier run? Internal purges erase witnesses. A handler disappears. Payroll collapses under a seizure. Or worse, her name lands on a list for being in the wrong room at the right time. The ledger from her locker shows initials next to city codes and arrows that loop back to a single date range. The month a cluster of missing persons and a fire in a warehouse drew 3 agencies to the docks. Burnouts like that are resets. After resets, liabilities move or get moved. The pivot point is the recording device that once lived in that leather pouch. Her notes show a failed upload years ago, encrypted packets that never found a safe server. That aligns with the night when she witnessed a sanctioned killing and captured the audio. She might have believed the device was a life raft, traded upward, buy a clean exit. But leverage without timing is a blade without a handle. The crew's policy isn't negotiation, it's deterrence. That symbol is how they write policy on skin. We track alias to origin using bus manifests, not flights. Cash tickets, no luggage, purchases made at kiosks that don't ask for names. She favors routes that cross state lines before dawn, switches carriers at mid-sized terminals with blind corners, and sleeps in seats facing the aisle. Her emergency cash band placement, left inner boot, right hip seam, jacket hem, stays consistent across years. Habits like that are muscle memory built under a mentor's rules. Someone trained her, someone who lived long enough for those rules to stick. Her earliest apartment application lists an employer that doesn't exist. The address points to a storefront that later becomes a phone repair shop. Underneath, a back office in the same footprint appears on a property roll linked to an offshore trust, then to a shell LLC with a name that resurfaces around consulting invoices in cities where the symbol shows up. That web doesn't prove one enterprise. It shows a method. Compartmentalization, replacement, deniability, hallmarks of organized crime with maritime tendrils. We interview a retired dock inspector who remembers a young woman matching her early appearance. Quiet, quick, always with a clipboard and a coffee. He doesn't offer names, he offers a process. Couriers checked manifest anomalies, then rode along to fix them. Fix meant cash, favors, or fear. When pressure built, runners were rotated. When someone overheard something they shouldn't, rotations became disappearances. So we asked the core question, when did surviving turn into running? The timestamp is etched in routine. Right after her handler's death, documented as an overdose, whispered as a cleanup, she changes hair, changes region, and starts stacking identity layers. She stops dating inside the orbit. She chooses a spouse far from docks, predictable in schedule, steady in temperament. Attachment becomes camouflage. That's not romance as we prefer to tell it. That's strategy engineered by fear. Cross-jurisdictional checks tie 2 bail skips to one of her alias initials, both in cities highlighted on her maps. In both, the underlying cases involve failure to appear after minor infractions that masked surveillance on bigger fish. After each skip, the symbol resurfaces, drawn on paper taped to a door, scrawled on a bar napkin, carved into a loading bay. The mark follows the debt, not the person, until the person carries the debt into a marriage, which brings us to origin. She isn't a bystander who married into a nightmare. She is a former asset who flipped her environment into a domestic shell. That shell worked until the network wanted a demonstration. Debts don't expire in systems that rely on fear. They compound, then convert into theater. Her husband's murder wasn't personal to the killer. It was policy directed at her, executed by someone who understands the value of a message that bleeds. Moving from her aliases to the machine behind them, consider the structure. These crews don't look like movie cartels. They're cells, compartmentalized. A broker at the center handles assignments and payouts. Handlers manage couriers and collectors. Runners move quietly between fronts, clubs, payday shops, warehouses near docks. Above them, an invisible board treats people like replaceable parts. Information flows upward, accountability flows downward. No one sees the whole map except the broker, and even then, only in fragments designed to limit damage when a piece breaks. Her role fits that architecture. At first, she moved envelopes and checked friendly doors, the kind that open when fear beats policy. Then she sat closer to decisions, pouring drinks while men negotiated interest rates on human lives. She didn't pull levers, she watched the levers pull others. That proximity is leverage and liability. You absorb how the system thinks. Timing, codes, the wording of threats dressed as opportunities. The crew's prize workers who become furniture in a room. She learned to be furniture. Handlers buffer leadership from risk. They recruit, train, and purify problems before they rise. When a handler disappears, Overdose, accident, unremarked burial. Two things happen. Files get burned, and the people closest to those files lose protection. That's when runners turn into fugitives. Loyalty in this context is a ledger entry. Once the person who vouches for you is gone, you become a variable. Variables get solved one of two ways: absorbed or erased. The symbol carved into her husband functions as governance inside that network. Think of it as a property tag and a policy memo. It doesn't scream on walls. It whispers in controlled places. It marks bodies tied to breaches, deserters, debt dodgers, witnesses who kept more than and memories. The geometry travels through small circles because its power relies on scarcity. If everyone recognizes it, it loses bite. If only the right people do, it becomes a code that moves faster than warrants. Why dockside cities? Maritime economies thrive on transience. Ships come and go. Cargo shifts hands at odd hours. Cash flows through clubs that never close. Surveillance is soft around edges where jurisdictional authority overlaps and blurs. Crews use that blur to hide payroll, rotate faces, and wash threats through nightlife. If you want a place where a courier can vanish into noise, you pick the back stairs of a club whose owner owes a favor. If you want a place where messages stick, you pick a body that can be photographed and quietly circulated. Her training shows classic tradecraft from that world. Identity stacking with shared initials to reduce errors under stress. Safe routes along service roads with low camera density. Cash bans in predictable placements. Tech hygiene that creates dead air instead of loud encryption. That discipline doesn't appear spontaneously. Someone gave her rules, and the rules match a network that treats people as both assets and examples. Retaliation follows a model, not passion, policy. First, a soft contact, a card slipped under a door, a symbol sketched in grease on a mirror that clears when steam fades. Second, a probe. Someone watches the house, tests the door camera, pings devices to read reaction. Third, the demonstration. If the target doesn't comply, the crew strikes where it hurts and leaves the mark. Its punishment is deterrence, calibrated for maximum internal circulation and minimal external noise. Her marriage complicated the equation, but not enough to spare him. The crew couldn't locate her quickly within the compartment she built, so they reached her via the most stable variable in her world, a spouse with routines. Love becomes leverage when organizations commodify attachment. The message wasn't to the city. It was to a closed audience. Anyone in the network considering defection, anyone holding a device like the one she moved. The line reads, "Policy remains. Debts compound. Examples will be made." The broker operationalizes that line. They launder domestic hits as private disputes, hire blades who specialize in clean entries and limited DNA, and pay through prepaid cards funded by digital off-ramps. Communication rides on brief voice notes burned after listening. Meet points are ordinary. Cafes, parking lots near big box stores, surrounded by ambient anonymity. If something goes wrong, the compartment collapses only one level deep. That keeps leadership insulated and the talent cheap. Clubs and lenders function as fronts for reasons beyond money. They create spaces where obedience is observed. If a shop owner pays on time, the room hums. If someone hesitates, a runner shows up with a smile and a deadline. When a runner disappears, the symbol appears in the margins, on a napkin, carved in a tabletop, scratched into paint behind a register. It's the same across cities in the ledger from her locker. Not many marks, just enough to keep memory current. Her flight years ago put her in the category of asset turned liability. That status lingers. Time doesn't erase it. It accrues. As new handlers cycle in, her file becomes lore. The courier with the recording, the woman who slipped. Lore needs conclusion. Networks like this don't tolerate unfinished stories, because unfinished stories breed courage. So they wrote an ending on a body that ensured she would hear it. Across town, unaware of the danger, neighbors still think in terms of burglary or rage. But inside the network, this was nothing of the sort. It was maintenance, a scheduled reminder that policy outlives personnel. The old network doesn't chase headlines, it chases compliance. And compliance is easier when everyone knows what the symbol means before it's carved. Consider what it takes to live as a moving target. Identity stacking isn't just paperwork, it's choreography. You build layered personas the way a mason lays brick, offset seams, redundant strength. Each alias shares initials, a cadence close enough to answer to in a crowd, and habits that don't collide. The trick isn't inventing a new self, it's editing the old one until it can pass. Cognitive load explains her curated slips. When your brain runs two scripts, public routine and private contingency, mundane details blur. Milk or bread becomes noise. The cashier's tattoo becomes anchor. You remember what could surface in an audit. You let the rest fall. That's not deceit in the moral sense. That's triage. Attachment under an alias serves two functions: camouflage and ballast. She chose a spouse like a stable harbor, predictable job, small circle, early nights. A person who signals safety outward and unintentionally anchors her inward. But attachment adds friction to flight. Every routine you build with someone else becomes a pattern predators can hunt. Breakfast time, gym days, trash night. The flaw in her strategy is structural. Routine is visible. Self-justification keeps the system running. You tell yourself the past is sealed. You say the device is tucked away, the ledger buried, the symbol retired. You clean your language, then a phrase slips. Clean phone, safe routes. And the echo tells on you. Humans reduce anxiety by constructing narratives that hold. Her narrative was endurance. If she stayed small and stayed steady, the storm would pass. But storms don't pass when the weather is policy. Look at her rituals. The 2:12 a.m. silences, the 4:19 thermostat nudges, the smart bulb cycles like shutter tests. These are micro-rehearsals that soothe. If I can control a light, I can control a threat. The mind is a locked box with a combination you practice daily so you don't fumble when the real door matters. The problem with rehearsal is that it leaves fingerprints on time. Predictability becomes a breadcrumb. Language is another mask. She speaks in short, precise bundles. No flourish, no warmth wasted. People confuse that with coldness. What it really is, conservation. In high-threat ecologies, excess expression is a leak. You keep your face still so it won't betray the flinch when you hear a name that doesn't belong in your new city. You ration grief so it won't drown you when you're on the phone with a dispatcher who might be recording the wrong story forever. Her environments reflect compartmentalization. 2 bags everywhere. Tote for public life, pouch for the life that fits in a hand. In the locker, bins labeled by function, not by memory. In the house, the decoy safe visible, the real contents disassembled across distance. Control is comfort. Comfort is the drug, and like all drugs, it masks symptoms while the disease progresses. Manipulation doesn't have to be malicious, it can be adaptive. Selective vulnerability becomes a tool. You share just enough softness to draw protectors, neighbors who see kindness, co-workers who see reliability, a spouse who sees steadiness. You're not faking affection. You're curating it, making sure it doesn't trip alarms. The line between authenticity and tactic blurs until even you can't separate them without pain. Trauma loops explain her calm. When threat is chronic, your nervous system recalibrates. A screaming crisis registers as familiar. The body narrows to tasks. Breathe, answer, move. The voice on the 911 call rides that groove. It isn't shock, it's a practiced channel. The metronome tap we'll later unpack fits the pattern. A coded cue to a watcher, a way to speak 2 conversations at once. Masks inside masks. Her flaw sits under all of it. She believed distance equaled safety. Change cities, change hair, change shifts. You outrun policy. But distance without disclosure just redistributes risk. The danger doesn't evaporate. It reroutes. Loved ones become mailboxes for threats you won't open. The husband with the fixed commute becomes a message board. It's brutal math, and the network counts on you to avoid it until they make you do the calculation in blood. There's an ethical knot here. Do you blame survival strategies for collateral? Or do you blame the machine that weaponizes love? Both can be true. The profile matters because it shows how good choices in one ecology, stay small, stay quiet, stay ready, become lethal in another, domestic one. She wasn't trying to play anyone. She was trying to remain unsolved. The thing is, unsolved isn't the same as safe. So when the pattern brings them to her door, it isn't sudden, it's gravitational, the open loops in her life, unanswered symbols, a device that still breathes on a ledger's page. Pull mass until something collides. That's how Alias Living ends. Not with a chase scene, but with a knock that never comes because they already let themselves in. 3 things changed, and all of them were small. An unknown car idled across the street 3 nights in a row, nose pointed away, lights off, engine barely above a whisper. A false delivery attempt left a sticky note with no company logo, just a time window and a scribbled diamond that looked like a doodle unless you knew what to fear. And 2 pieces of mail meant for a neighbor landed in his box, wrong unit number, same street, both addressed by hand. Anomalies, easy to shrug off. He tried to shrug them off. His sleep broke first. Irritability replaced patience. He Googled how to tell if you're being watched at 2:20 a.m. and fell into threads about stalkers, security lights, and doorbell cameras. He cleared browsing history with the clumsy care of someone who thinks privacy lives inside a trash icon. At work, he asked a colleague offhand if their neighborhood had seen kids messing around with mail. At home, he paced between the window and the sink, sipping water he didn't need, peeking through blinds he swore he'd keep open to normalize it. The gifts began as noise. A single playing card in an unmarked envelope, taped to the inside of the mailbox as if placed from within. A diamond, not red, but blackened with marker, its lower angle notched. He didn't recognize the variant, but he felt the intent. He showed it to her. She turned it over without touching the face, said, "Teenagers?" too quickly, then tucked it in the drawer where warranties go to die. That drawer would be cataloged later. The card would be gone. CCTV fragments put shape to the shadow. The hooded figure wasn't tall, wasn't short. Average is harder to pin. They moved with that economy you learn in jobs where footprints matter, arms close, steps measured, head tilted just enough to erase a clean face on a fisheye. Over 3 evenings, the same figure traced sightlines from shrubs to windows, pausing at the cable junction box on the side of the house, fingers grazing the panel without opening it. A tester's touch, reading the current, mapping the silence. He noticed the car first, then the figure, then the misdirected mail. He started locking the deadbolt twice and checking it again, a habit that soothes until it spirals. He told a neighbor about a weird knock that didn't come with footsteps, then waved it off because the neighbor looked tired and he didn't want to be dramatic. He bought a motion light for the backyard and never installed it. The box sat near the door, unopened, an intention he could point at like a talisman. Inside the house, patterns narrowed. He kept the TV on for background noise, volume low, sports he didn't care about, an alibi soundscape. He sat where he could see the door and the window in the same glance. He started leaving his shoes by the couch. He texted her during the day more than usual. Photos of the dog, a casserole he pretended turned out fine, emojis that read, like, filler. She responded with hearts, thumbs up, short words that felt like cues more than comfort. She knew the rhythm tightening. She didn't break it. The neighbor's report was the missed opportunity. 2 doors down, a nurse came off a night shift and saw someone crouched by the hedge line, the shape of a body where bodies don't belong at dawn. She called non-emergency, then changed her mind and told herself it was a raccoon or a teenager retrieving a lost ball. Ordinary has gravity. People let it pull. He started carrying a small flashlight from room to room. He tested it twice a night. He told himself the batteries were cheap and that's why it flickered. He Googled best self-defense flashlight and closed the tab when an ad popped for tactical gear. He didn't want his browser suggesting a life he didn't lead. He wanted his old life back, the one where he forgot trash day and waved to the mail carrier without scanning their hands. 2 days before his death, his phone's notes app contains a list titled Odd, the car, the card, the knock, the mail. Thermostat, with a question mark and flicker lights 303? He wasn't paranoid. He was finally noticing. He wrote, "Talk to her," and didn't. Maybe he had tried and watched her go still, the calm that used to soothe now reading like distance. Maybe he didn't want to name the shape he felt forming because names make things real. Across town, the hooded figure bought coffee, paid cash, and watched the house on a tablet that mirrored the street-facing camera's lagged feed. Tests were complete. Timelines fixed. The broker's schedule didn't flex for grief. The net had already closed. He was just living his normal in the shrinking space inside it. On the last afternoon, a package appeared at the step addressed to no one, a small, heavy rectangle. He brought it inside, set it on the counter, and washed his hands as if handling unknown weight required ritual. He cut the tape, saw only foam, closed it, and laughed at himself. He set it aside to discard later. The foam held a recess the size of an obsolete recorder. Empty space as a prelude. A reminder of absence. Policy disguised as a box. He didn't know the language. He felt the intent, and intent was already inside the house. Entry starts where attention doesn't, not the front door, not the slider. The bypass rides the garage keypad housing. A shim slipped under the cover days earlier during those scouting laps. Tonight, the blade lifts the faceplate a quarter inch. A jump wire kisses the contacts. The motor hums, then stalls by design. The intruder kills power at the wall before the door can move, avoiding the telltale shake neighbors hear. With the house thinking the garage is in motion, the interior door's sensor sleeps for 20 seconds. That window is the breach. Inside, the first move is darkness control. A small film strip laid over the foyer motion sensor drops sensitivity by half. The TV glows as usual. He's on the couch, shoes by the coffee table, the unopened box still on the counter. The intruder watches his breath, then steps in on a tide of ambient sound. The compliance strike comes clean, short-handled rubberized grip behind the right ear. He folds without a shout. The remote drops. The light doesn't change. Restraint is methodical. Paracord loops, tension applied gradually. The micro-tears we saw weren't accidents. They're cadence. The killer tightens, pauses, listens to his breath recalibrate. Tightens again. The rug shifts under a knee. The angle lines up with the later turn-up at the corner. No furniture breaks. This is control, not struggle. He asks what they want. He's told to stay quiet. The voice is low, regional accent sanded down to neutral. You don't learn that in one night. The control phase isolates him from options, phone out of reach, shoes away from feet. The couch cushions stay in place. Visual order keeps neighbors from noticing if a curtain lifts. A hand to the mouth when he tries to call her name. He's not gagged, he's managed. That's important. Gags are messy. Hands are signals the body understands faster than words. The killer checks the hallway with a quick, lean, verifying emptiness. The house answers with silence. Stabbing escalates on a schedule. Early thrusts avoid organ depth, spaced as if measured by fingers, counted. Not many, not few, enough to open time. He pleads. The killer's breath stays even. A pause to wipe a handle with a cloth, dampened in that industrial cleaner. The scent blooms and fades. A drip line pulls toward the hall, then turns back. That's the reset we traced in blood. Something forgotten, then remembered. The TV light flickers through a commercial break. The wife's alibi clock ticks elsewhere. Store receipt at 6:21, a camera catching her car at a side street, a return at 7:07. In the house, the thermostat dips 2 degrees after the primary violence. Not before. The killer lingers, gloves flex. A drawer opens and closes without sound. The eyes in the room don't meet. When the end arrives, it's quick, deep, decisive. He exhales like a tire losing air. The killer holds the line until motion halts, then counts a silent number that lives in habit. Time keeps order. The ritual begins only after life ends. The blade changes, cleaner edge for precise carving. The symbol's strokes align to practice, top, side, notch, last. Shallow enough to keep the lines sharp for a camera, deep enough to mark meaning. The killer kneels where the rug later tells on them. Breath still even? No flourish, just policy written in skin. A cloth pats the edges dry where sweat broke through gloves. The message is finished. Exit isn't exit yet. Retrieval comes next. The small, safe imprint in the closet is noted and ignored. Decoys waste time. The real targets are small, low value on paper, the leather pouch, the obsolete cable, the notebook with impressions. The killer moves with foreknowledge. Straight to the office, under the desk lip, to the drawer that holds the warranties, and the card. The card is gone before it can be inventoried. The pouch's twin impression at the unit tells us this had a pair. One half was here until tonight. Now the cleanup is selective. Doorknob wiped. Remote swabbed. Light switch left alone. Too obvious. A cloth passes over the threshold where the worn heel print still ghosts. The killer looks up at the camera by the door, reads its small power blink, and lets it blink. Evidence is managed, not erased. The thermostat dip logs at 6:44. Cooling the room buys minutes on paper, not truth. Still, it's part of the script. Staging comes last and light. A drawer of costume jewelry dumped, nothing taken. A window latch marred just enough to suggest a try, dust undisturbed beneath. The narrative is burglary, but the body contradicts. That dissonance is intentional. Investigators argue longer when the scene says two things. Arguments buy time. The phone rings in a distant pocket. The wife texting a heart, a thumbs up, a cue. The killer doesn't check it. They pocket the obsolete cable wrapped in cloth, the pouch flattened under a shirt, the notebook slick in a bag. One more pass of the industrial wipe over the cloth that held the carving blade. Transfer minimized, meaning preserved. The TV glows, the room breathes, the house hums like any other. Exit reuses the entry gap. The interior door opens during another 20-second sleep. The garage motor pretends to wake, then doesn't. The faceplate drops back into place with a soft click. Outside, the car with the coastal area code pings the cafe network down the block for 10 seconds, then vanishes from our grid. The timeline closes. The wife arrives to a scene arranged to instruct her. She steps in, sees the symbol, and doesn't say it. The call at 7:13 is steady. She follows a script. The metronome tap, faint, rhythmic, begins on the kitchen counter. A signal, not to the dispatcher, to a watcher who knows the code. The mark did its work before the first officer crossed the threshold. The night wasn't chaos. It was a meeting kept, a message delivered, a debt collected in the language they both understood. The first words matter. I need to report an emergency. No name, no relationship. Distance before disclosure. The dispatcher asks location. She supplies it cleanly, no quaver, as if reciting a policy she's practiced. Then, my husband is on the floor. Not hurt, not bleeding. On the floor. Neutral placement instead of condition. This is effect management, not indifference. You hear her breathing, steady, shallow. In the background, a faint, regular tapping, 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause. The metronome we flagged later. It syncs to her 419 discipline window. She isn't soothing herself, she's sending rhythm. If someone is listening on a parallel device, this is a go, no-go code. The dispatcher asks if he's awake. No. Responsive? No. Then comes the instruction. Check breathing, begin compressions. She says, "There's so much, he's cold." Cold is a hedge that buys her a pass on CPR. She doesn't ask for a refresher. People try even when there's no chance. She narrates movement instead. I'm by him, I'm holding his hand. That phrase satisfies empathy without inviting more instruction. Word choice keeps undercutting immediacy. I found him like this. Not, this just happened. Like this suggests a scene she walked into, not one that unfolded. She avoids the shape carved in him entirely, as if the language to describe it would betray knowledge. When the dispatcher asks, "Do you see any injuries?" she says, "There's a lot of blood," then pivots. "Please hurry." It's not avoidance of gore. It's avoidance of the message. Acoustic analysis isolates the tap. Not a fingernail on counter, too soft. Not a utensil, too consistent. Likely the pad of a finger against a wood edge or the plastic of the unopened box still on the counter. The pattern repeats 6 times in the first minute, then stops whenever the dispatcher asks a direct question. Tap resumes when silence returns. Call and response with an audience outside the line. Timing doesn't love her alibi. Cell records fix the call's origination inside the neighborhood sector at 7:13. The grocery receipt printed at 6:21. The route she took adds minutes. GPS pings place her car turning onto the side street at 6:54. By 7:07 she parks. 6 minutes later, she's on with dispatch. That's enough time to see, freeze, and call. It's also enough time to do exactly what she does: move nothing, speak carefully, and perform calm. The dispatcher tries to anchor her. "Tell me what you see." She keeps it generic. "He's on the floor. He's not moving." "Where's the blood?" "Everywhere." Everywhere shuts doors. It ends specificity. She gives detail only when it can't hurt. The front door was locked. The TV is on. Both signal normalcy prior to discovery. Both align with scene logic. Neither touches the symbol. She's careful with pronouns. They hurt him. Not someone. They. Pluralization without prompting reveals an internal script. In domestic calls, you hear he or she even when the offender is unknown. In staged burglaries, you hear someone. She says they, which is how people talk when they've been told since long ago that threats come as teams. The network lives in her grammar. The voice holds even when sirens grow audible on the line. Most callers either collapse into relief or spike into hysteria. She calibrates downward. I'm here. I'm staying on. The cadence is too smooth for fresh shock. It matches the dissociative channel she uses under stress. The profile doesn't say she's a killer. It says she's a practiced caller. When asked if anyone else should be in the house, she says, no. Then, after a beat, not today. That addendum is small, but it's a seam. Who might be there on other days? A cleaner? A dog walker? A friend? Or the person she expects sometimes from the old world, instructions arriving as presents. The dispatcher doesn't catch it. We do, hours later, replaying the breath. At minute 3, she volunteers a grocery alibi without being asked. I was at the store. People often over-explain when they fear suspicion. She doesn't over-explain. She front-loads. Receipts in my bag. The script anticipates audit. She is placing evidence in the investigator's hand through the dispatcher's notes. That's not innocence. That's experience. The tap resumes once more. Sharper, 2 sets of 3, then a long pause. If it's a code, this sequence likely marks message received or condition met. We map it to the light cycles in our home logs, 303, 307, 311, and the thermostat nudge at 419. The same counting mind, the same comfort in rhythm. The sound stops as the first responder knocks. Right before she ends the call, The dispatcher asks, "Do you see any writing, any marks?" It's a fishing question. She says, "No, just please hurry." The refusal isn't ignorance, it's control. Saying the symbol aloud acknowledges the language, and acknowledging the language is itself a message to the network that she is still fluent. She chooses silence on that channel. On the other, the metronome already spoke. Consider what the call accomplishes. It summons help, establishes discoverer status, plants the grocery timeline, and avoids the ritual. It also sends a parallel signal. Two conversations in one breath. That is the mask in action. Calm as cover, precision as camouflage, and beneath it, the old training whispering through the line. The room is plain on purpose, neutral paint. 2 chairs, 1 recorder. She sits with open shoulders, chin level, hands nested exactly as before. The posture broadcasts cooperation. The stillness broadcasts control. We set a baseline. Childhood, schools, jobs, small talk that isn't small at all. Her breaths lengthen a half beat when answers bend. That's our metronome now. "Walk me through your day," I say. She delivers parcels. Left at 6, receipt at 6:21, back by 7, call at 7:13. The edges are clean, and that's the tell. Clean edges don't belong to shock. They belong to rehearsal. I ask about the side street. Red light. We let silence sit. She adds, "Detour sign, too." There was no detour. She watches my face for confirmation and gets none. We calibrate with soft pressure. "What did you cook last Tuesday?" She stalls, then smiles. "Frozen pizza?" She doesn't like guessing. Guessing creates branches she'll have to prune later. "What did you buy at the store tonight?" "Bread, milk, batteries." Her recall lands on batteries again, the same brand she named earlier. The redundant anchor is comfort, but it's also rope. People grab what they've tested. We slide to language. "Any reason you used the phrase clean phone on the call?" She blinks once, slow. "I meant I didn't have my phone with anything on it." She's editing as she talks. I nod. "You also said safe routes, describing your drive." A thin shrug. "I like back roads." We let the words hang, then set them down without commentary. A seed grows better in quiet. We widen to work. "Who's your emergency contact?" "My cousin." We read the number aloud. "We tried to reach them." "They travel." "For what?" "Construction." "Company name?" "Independent." Each noun avoids an anchor. She's keeping the silhouette soft. When asked about vacation, she repeats, "I'm not a traveler." Our file says otherwise. Short-term leases, gym rotations, travel without photos, movement disguised as stasis. We bring up the pouch. "Coworkers say you always carried a smaller bag. Wallet, makeup. Anyone ever see inside?" "No reason to." "Where is it now?" "Home, maybe." She knows it's missing. She floats maybe to buy space. The recorder captures the tiniest exhale. A tell, then a recovery. Composure isn't guilt. It's management. And management frays at the corners first. Pressure points come next. Storage unit, cash bands, wigs. "We executed a warrant." She doesn't blink. "For my safety." The word safety returns like a buoy. "The wigs?" "Alopecia sometimes." "Medical documentation?" "Not with me." She lets the answer close the door without locking it. "Cash?" "For emergencies." "How many?" "Enough." Enough is a vacuum. It pulls questions in and leaves them floating without a place to land. We mark time of death details without asking for reaction. Thermostat dip after violence. Selective cleaning. Symbol carved post-mortem. Her eyes lower at the word symbol and lift at post-mortem. Avoidance paired with technical relief. She didn't want to picture the carving. She appreciated that he didn't feel it. That's not an admission. That's a human flicker under armor. We pivot. "Tell me how you and your husband met." "Coffee shop, I spilled." We let the silence work. "He says hardware store," I say. Through a coworker. She nods quickly. Right, I forgot that part. Origin stories don't wobble unless they're built. She smooths the seam, but the fabric remembers. She releases grief on schedule. He didn't deserve this. Breath catches on husband, then smooths. She dabs one tear. It's not performance, it's rationing. I don't reward or punish it. I change the temperature. Do you know what the mark means? What mark? The refusal is immediate, too clean. If she had never seen the symbol, she'd ask what I meant. Instead, she denies its existence, then adds, I wasn't looking at details. She ensures the recorder hears ignorance. We lay the digital cadence gently. Your phone goes silent every night at 2:12 for 15 minutes. Sleep mode? Sleep mode doesn't change sectors. Must be the tower. Every night? She presses her lips and shrugs. I don't know how towers work. The thing is, she does. She just can't say it without admitting a category of life that explains too much. We bring in the side street camera. Her car idles 3 minutes. I took a call. From who? Recruiter. Name? I don't remember. She prefers not remembering to inventing. We leave that thread on the table and move to the metronome tap on the 911 call. Were you tapping? Nervous. It was rhythmic. I have anxious habits. The lines stay plausible by inches. The slip arrives small. I ask if anyone ever called her by another name. Not since... She stops. Not since when? College. What name? Nessa. No one here knows that nickname. She never listed it. She feels the silence harden and turns it into a smile. Short for Vanessa. Her legal name isn't Vanessa. The correction comes too late to erase the first word. We don't pounce, we let it bruise. We deploy a tactical pause. 30 seconds of nothing, chairs, breath, HVAS. People hate silence because it hands them a mirror. She inhales, exhales, then starts offering comfort phrases. I want to help. I'll answer what I can. I'm not hiding anything. The frequency of I increases when the mask warms. We don't chase it. We change lanes. We found a cable in your storage unit, I say. Old, specific. She blinks slow again. My husband kept old tech. It matched a snag on the cloth used to wipe a blade. Another pause. She swallows. Are you accusing me? I shake my head. No. I'm asking who else has handled your things. Saying your things invites possession. She rejects it. Those are just objects. We stand. We're going to need leverage, I say, almost to the recorder. We'll talk to someone who knew you then. She tilts her head. A shadow of calculation crosses her face. There is no then, she says softly. It's the closest she comes to a plea, which means there's a then worth finding. As the door closes behind her, the mask still fits. But we've found the seam. Moving from the interview room to the past she won't name, we look for someone who saw her before the mask hardened. The first rule in these networks: handlers know the runners better than leadership does. Most handlers don't live long. One did. He answers to a code name, not a legal one, and meets where surveillance blends with noise. A car wash lot where blowers drown microphones and wet concrete erases footprints. He keeps his hands in his jacket, not for threat, but for habit. Hands give away truth. He doesn't start with stories. He starts with code. You're looking for the diamond, yes? His accent is neither here nor there. Floaters talk like ports. We don't confirm. We let him talk. The mark isn't art, it's a stamp. It says, property disputed. It says, debt with teeth. He glances at our recorder, then up at the sky. You won't get leadership with a symbol, but you'll get policy. We ask about her without saying her name. He smiles the way men do when loss sits behind teeth. She learned fast, not greedy. That kept her alive longer than most. He sketches roles with short strokes. At first she carried paper. Then she carried presence. Men say the quiet part to a woman who pours just right. He pauses. I told her to never memorize names. She disobeyed. It saved her once. It hurt her later. Tradecraft sits in his rhythm. Names are sigils, 2 letters, never full. Meetings run on clocks that don't hit the hour. If you're told to walk at 4:19, you walk at 4:19 for the rest of your life. That anchors her thermostat habit without him knowing the log. He describes dead drops folded into ordinary acts, a bus ticket tucked behind a soap dispenser, a cable slid into a bag of rice at a phone repair counter. Anyone searches. It looks like mess. But the mess is the map. We ask about the symbol's origin. He doesn't romance it. Years back, a collection went bad. A boy disappeared. We were getting sloppy. Leadership needed a quiet correction. They picked a shape because words leak. Shapes don't. The first time they used it on skin, he says, it traveled through pictures, not newspapers. Controlled circulation. The point isn't the victim. The point is the echo. Why did she run? He doesn't flinch. Because she heard the full thing, not the noise, the order. He taps the car window with a knuckle 3 times, the same cadence as her metronome. She had a toy, old recorder, good mic. She used it wrong and right. She captured a sanctioned kill, and then she tried to trade it before the water was high enough. He shrugs. Timing, always timing. He tells us how bounties work in their world, not posters. Standing orders that never expire. Retrieve the recorder or erase the one who held it. The reward isn't money alone. It's restoration. Someone in debt becomes clean. That builds a crowd of volunteers. You think 1 blade did your man, 1 blade did the room, 5 wanted the permission. The mark on the husband, he says, is also a ledger entry. This obligation is paid in blood, not in cash. We slide him photographs, the obsolete cable, the pouch imprint, the ledger with sigils and tiny diamonds. His eyes flicker at the cable, go flat at the ledger. Whoever trained her gave her a good brain for boxes. She kept things separate. But separation fails when policy turns inward. He taps a sigil with the tip of a nail. This one was a broker we thought dead. He looks up. You're not chasing ghosts. You're chasing a business model. He admits he almost died the year she vanished. I got lucky. Leadership cut their own to cauterize a leak. I had a friend in a uniform who liked me more than policy. I started a new life that looks like laundry and breakfast, not knives. He laughs once, without humor. But the mark shows up sometimes, on a table, on a door, like a sermon you can't skip. He never says her name. He never says his. He speaks in verbs. We press the edge. Was she ever violent? He frowns. You're asking the wrong question. She was obedient. That's what scared me. Obedient people survive by becoming furniture, but furniture holds weight until the legs crack. He leans in. You want a flaw? She believed the thing could be bartered. You can't barter a sermon. You can only decide who sits in the front row. We shift to mechanism. Who launders domestic jobs now? He stares at the foam drifting from a stall. Brokers rotate. One we called Yellow runs disputes, like calendar reminders. She likes prepaid cards and parking lots. She never speaks twice in the same tone. He accepts a photo of a woman from our surveillance, a plain coat, an old cable in hand. He nods without performing. If she carried the cable, she carried an ask. Cable is key. Device is door. Behind the door, a voice that can name the board. We ask for help we can use in court. He laughs again, softer. You don't bring the ocean to court. You bring a bucket and call it rain. Then he surprises us. He offers an address for a dead drop still active, a place where Yellow receives tools too hot to hold. Once a week, early. She trusts the old rhythms. He looks at our hands. You'll need to be quiet. She's not brave. She's careful. Careful people are harder. Before he leaves, he gives one more piece, almost tender. Tell her I didn't teach her to love a safe life. I taught her to survive. She turned it into love because she's human. That's not a crime, but it's expensive. He steps into mist and disappears between bays, just another man avoiding a spray. Moving from the scene to motive, the handler's message is simple. This murder wasn't a burst of rage. It was a retrieval operation with a sermon attached. The symbol's origin isn't art, it's law in their world. And law there is written in whispers and cuts. Inventory should be boring, ours isn't. The decoy safe at the house sits untouched, but a smaller, portable safe is missing. Not pried, not dragged, absent the way a tooth leaves a smooth, tongue-shaped gap. The closet carpet shows a compressed oval that springs back everywhere except one faint ridge. That ridge maps to the hinge side of a travel safe. She staged a visible vault and kept the real leverage small enough to walk. Cloud traces confirm a parallel story. Years ago, an encrypted upload tried to surface from a prepaid hotspot, failed at 91%, and never retried. The packets carried the signature of an obsolete recorder's file format, monocapture, high noise floor, time code baked into metadata rather than sidecar. That matters because only a few devices wrote time like that, and only one used the same connector profile as the cable we seized. The device made one last breath online, then sank. Her contact list is a graveyard. Numbers that once lived now return silence. One entry still pings, but not with messages, with a heartbeat that checks a dead mailbox twice a month. The name attached is a nonsense noun. The pattern attached is careful. Whoever owns it watches for a wake-up signal and reacts only if the rhythm breaks. Sleepers built the channel. Sleepers keep it warm. We define the device because definition narrows suspects. It's a compact recorder from a line retired a decade ago, favored by people who needed quiet buttons and reliable time. It writes to solid-state media that resists casual corruption. To dump its contents, you need that specific cable or a dock built for it. The dock vanished from retail long before her marriage. The cable didn't. She kept the cable. Whoever killed her husband needed it to open the door she'd kept half-locked. A repair shop gives us the hinge. In a boring database of past orders, we find a ticket for legacy cable fitment and jack rehab. Paid cash, listed under her earliest alias pattern. The work order notes, client declines replacement, requests preservation of existing connector. That's not nostalgia. That's operational integrity. Keep the original link so the chain remains closed to outsiders. We show the shop owner a photo of the cable wrap. He nods and recites a familiar sentence. She said she'd come back if the rest survived. We move from motive to mechanism. The missing device is the objective. The murder pulled double duty. Punish the fugitive and retrieve the proof she carried. Our evidence inventory shows what else disappeared. The leather pouch, a small notebook with pressure impressions, likely used as a quick log when the recorder was hot, and a key card marked 419, replaced by its twin at the unit. The killer, or the hand behind the killer, knew exactly what mattered. They left jewelry and took a cable. They left laptops and took a pouch big enough to hide in a coat. The cloud trail offers one more angle. The failed upload tried to reach an old file-sharing service under a username that appears once in a forum thread about maritime insurance fraud. The poster references diamond policy, a phrase that ties back to the symbol's internal name, according to our handler. The same username follows a single account on a defunct microblog, which now hosts only one post, a timestamp and 3 black diamonds. No comment, no image, a breadcrumb for people who know their own trail. Contacting the live node risks triggering whoever waits on the other side. Instead, we watch. The mailbox pings at predictable intervals. We introduce noise, a harmless test email with a blank subject and a single space. It bounces. A second with a white circle emoji slips through, and returns no error. That matches the rule in her metadata. Only messages with symbols pass the filter. We've mapped the language. We won't speak it yet. The broker's pattern intersects here. Surveillance shows her meeting an unremarkable woman who hands over a pouch and an old cable in a parking lot. The pouch burned with the symbol inside as theater, but the cable is key. The broker collects keys. She sells doors. Our seizures from her office include ledgers of payments that cluster around the murder date and a list of tools returned. One line reads, cable, diamond, okay. Another reads, device, pending. The question mark is the whole case. If the killer failed to recover the recorder, someone else has it. If they succeeded, someone else is already listening. We pull a thread at the dead drop the handler gave us. Before dawn, a courier leaves a small taped box in a trash can liner behind a bus terminal snack counter. We lift it before the broker does. Inside, a data card adapter, an ancient battery, and a handwritten note. Cable only, device burned, audio partial. It's a lie dressed as closure. The adapter matches the recorder line. The battery still holds charge. When we test it, it takes power like a patient waking. The truth is likely split. The device moved. The broker didn't get to keep it. Which brings us back to her. Our evidence now says she moved the recorder before the murder. The cable drop we intercepted was bait designed to flush the broker out, to prove who still ran diamond policy in this city. Her goal wasn't to give the device away. It was to buy a negotiation with proof of possession. She misread the equation. They weren't bargaining. They were writing a memo on her husband's body while they hunted the key to the locked box she'd hidden for years. Moving from motive to mechanism, we build the blade's profile from the residue of his work. Clean entry, limited DNA, mixed implements chosen for phases, compliance, control, inscription. That toolkit says training, not military, too many deviations from doctrine, not street impulsivity, too consistent across steps. This is a contractor cultivated in domestic jobs where message matters as much as mortality. Start with physical competence. He moves with joint economy, elbows tucked, hips quiet, knees absorbing weight to minimize floor noise. Shoe prints are absent because he rides sock or booty once inside, but the worn heel ghost on the threshold shows pronation on the right foot. Height reads average from reach marks at the keypad housing. Strength is functional, not showy. The compliance strike demanded precision, not mass. He likely trains in practical, grappling, enough to manage a body without leaving excessive struggle indicators. His psychological profile is colder than rage. Patient, ritual-friendly, message-oriented. He tolerates time in the room after death, which points to desensitization through repetition. The stop-start tension on restraints suggests he calibrates based on breath and pulse. That's a caretaker perversion inverted, monitoring life to control it. He uses antiseptic wipes with an industrial scent, a brand common to janitorial supply. He's thinking about transfer, but he's not obsessive. He leaves trace where trace won't hurt, erases where it will. That's not fear of prison. That's adherence to a broker's checklist. MO overlaps with a coastal series we flagged. 3 killings in dock-adjacent neighborhoods, all with light staging, all with a small geometric mark carved post-mortem. Not the same shape then, but the same grammar. Lines meant for circulation, not spectacle. Surveillance near one of those scenes caught a sedan idling with a plate that backtraced to a shell rental paid by prepaid card. Our current case shows the same payment vector. Microloads at a kiosk 2 days before, cashed out 2 days after. The cadence matches. Payment says more about access. Prepaid cards funded via a crypto off-ramp point to someone comfortable with digital laundering but not embedded in high-end fraud. He receives instructions through brief voice notes. Compression artifacts on a recovered burner confirm messages under 10 seconds, wiped by software that overwrites memory blocks. His phone discipline keeps him off major towers at key moments. He piggybacks on public Wi-Fi and drives dead zones like seams in a quilt. That's trained habit, not luck. Now, let's look at the implements. Compliance tool. Short-handled, rubberized, easily pocketed. Control tool, paracord rated for utility, not decoration, cut with a serrated edge that left microfiber fuzz in the knot mouths. Inscription tool, cleaner blade, likely a scalpel or a whittling knife with replaceable blades, carried in a cloth wrap later swabbed with the same industrial cleaner. The decision to switch tools mid-scene shows compartmentalized thinking. Each phase has its instrument. Each instrument has its cleanup. He maps houses the way dock crews map warehouses. Entries that aren't entries, sensors that sleep if you make the right lie. The garage bypass in this case mirrors a prior incident where a breaker was tripped to buy sensor blindness. He prefers systems he can nudge without brute force. Brute force invites noise. Noise invites witnesses. He's not a brawler. He's a locksmith of moments. The message rhythm runs deeper. Top, side, notch, last. Counted, practiced. That's signature inside Mo. Personal habit shaped by organizational policy. He likely trained his hand by drawing the mark in repetition until muscle learned geometry without sight. In one coastal case, a survivor described a hum during the carving. Not a song. A counting sound without melody. Our house held silence, but the precision tells on the same inner metronome. He's not local in the social sense, but he may be regionally transient, work near ports, temporary housing near infrastructures that forgive cash, gyms with day passes at odd hours, laundromats before dawn, food purchased at places that don't ask names, coffee in cash, tips in exact change. His car carries a portable toolkit, nitrile gloves in mixed sizes, brokers recycle supplies, and compliance doesn't always mean a perfect fit. A fiber recovered from the cloth wrap, matched cord at the scene, and a secondary fiber, synthetic tan, aligns with budget car upholstery. He rents, he returns, he moves. Speaking of motive, he doesn't own this feud. He rents it. He takes policy and makes it physical. The symbol isn't his belief, it's his assignment. That detachment explains the even breath, the adherence to steps, the lack of post-offense adrenaline leakage. No rummaging, no souvenir. He removes only what's on the list. Cable, pouch, quick log, card. That reads like a broker's directive transmitted with penalties for deviation. We can sketch his day of routine. Pre-scene. A recon lap to test sensors, a run to a cafe with stable Wi-Fi to receive final go, a short drive with a device mirroring the doorcam's lag, entry during a noise basin, TV on, local traffic rising, strike, control, inscription, retrieval, light stage, selective wipe, exit during a neighbor's known quiet window, post-scene, a handoff to a vehicle parked just out of grid, a stop to launder tools with cleaner, a deposit at a dead drop for the broker, then distance, either coastal highway or rail yard edge parking before dawn. What breaks blades like him isn't conscience, it's logistics. If we can tie his fibers to purchase cordage batches, match his wipes to a supply lot distributed to a small set of janitorial wholesalers, and link prepaid card load locations to camera frames with his gait, we close the loop. The thing is, blades believe they're fog. They forget fog leaves do. The profile says he will work again, which gives us a window. Catch the broker, and you catch the pattern. Catch the pattern, and you name the blade. Now, let's look at the mechanics of the crime. Brokers don't wave flags, they cast nets out of paperwork. We start with shell companies, short-lived LLCs formed in bulk, dissolved before annual reports mature. Names read like bland consulting outfits or logistics advisories. Their addresses rotate through mailbox stores and co-working suites where no one remembers faces after checkout. Each entity opens a merchant account, processes consulting or facilitation fees in round numbers, then shutters before patterns harden. Payment leaves a faint heartbeat. Bank triggers fire around the murder date, a cluster of micro-deposits spread across 3 banks, each under reporting thresholds, each routed from an overseas processor that specializes in digital content. Content is a euphemism. The deposits land, then wash into prepaid ecosystems, reloadable cards you can buy in kiosks with cash. The timing is choreographed. Load at dawn, hire by dusk, settle 2 days later when heat cools. Communication is built to disappear. Dead drops replace threads. The broker uses brief voice notes, under 10 seconds compressed, wiped by overwrite apps that salt memory blocks. She leaves a phone in a locker for 1 cycle, then discards it in a bin with a false bottom at a thrift store. The blades pick up instructions from devices that will never meet a courtroom because they never live long enough to be seized. The thing is, deletion leaves patterns. When you burn 5 phones in 5 days near the same cafe, cameras catch posture, not just faces. We map her cadence through ordinary places. A strip mall copy shop where printers churn invoices for conflict mediation. A laundromat where a middle machine spins with no clothes, drum noise masking the whisper of short calls. A parking lot where an unremarkable woman passes an old cable in a pouch stamped inside with the symbol's heat-burnished geometry. She isn't brave, she's careful. Careful means she chooses high-noise, low-memory environments and never lingers long enough to be a character. Surveillance puts her in the orbit of 3 shell LLCs, each opened within 90 days of a major domestic dispute in our region. Each paid a consultant who cashed out through a crypto off-ramp that specializes in anonymized withdrawals at ATMs that don't photograph customers. But the ATM vestibules do. We don't chase faces, we chase gait. The same slight inward roll of the right ankle, the same wrist touch before exiting, checking a phantom watch, anchoring time. Her bank patterns reveal tells. Micro-deposits spike the day before the killing, then again 2 days after. Between spikes, she buys ordinary, coffee, parking, a hardware store purchase that matches the cleaner used at our scene. The receipt shows Industrial Degreaser, a brand sold in bulk to janitorial contractors. Brokers don't swing blades, but they stock kits. Kits pass down the chain with supplies, and supplies tie to wholesalers. We subpoena 2 distributors. 1 shipment of degreaser and paracord went to a Shell LLC that dissolved last month. The pickup signature is an alias we've already seen in her network. Dead drops hold the keys. The handler pointed us to one behind a bus terminal snack counter. We lift the box before she does. A data card adapter, an old battery, a note. Cable only, device burned, audio partial. The note's script matches a hand from her ledgers. The pouch's burn mark told a story of closure. The adapter tells the opposite. She's collecting pieces for an unlock she doesn't intend to share with anyone but leadership. If the device resurfaces, she wants the first listen. We thread the prepaid trail. Cards load at kiosks clustered near big box stores. Cameras show a rotating cast, but the load sequence is identical. 2 cards staggered by 5 minutes with identical amounts that echo the micro-deposit clusters. When those cards pay the blade's rent and meals, the purchases land inside walking distance of dock rail spurs. Is transient. She's stationary by comparison, circling the same 5 blocks where cell towers overlap, creating sector ambiguity on paper. A meet cements the hinge. She sits with a woman who carries an old cable wrapped in cloth, sets it down alongside a pouch with the symbol burned inside. Our seizure from the broker's office later includes a ledger line. Cable, diamond, okay. Device, pending. Next to it, a column of numbers that matches 3 consulting invoices in one of her LLCs. That column totals exactly the micro-deposit cluster 2 days after the murder. Payment on partial performance. The broker paid for the key, not the door. When we execute a warrant on our office, the evidence hall is quiet but precise. Burner phones with wipe artifacts, ritual photos from prior jobs where small marks write on skin, and payment ledgers with nicknames that map to our coastal series. In a drawer, a pouch with faint heat-stamped geometry holds spare blades and a microfiber cloth that carries the same industrial cleaner signature as our scene. She launders message and method together. The pouch is branding and admin in one. The cable is the key. Without it, the obsolete recorder's contents stay locked in a format few can crack on short notice. With it, the broker can promise leadership a product, a voice naming the order behind a sanctioned killing years ago. That is, leverage upward and control downward. Which brings us to the pivot. The device is still out there. If she has it, she consolidates power. If she doesn't, someone else does, someone who can bargain. Either way, following her money doesn't just identify a broker. It maps a market where punishment and proof trade hands like inventory. Now we pivot from the broker's web to her counterplay. She wasn't passive. She anticipated contact, moved the device off-site, and turned the cable into bait. Think about this. If the mind is a locked box, she kept the key noisy and the contents quiet. The pouch and cable became decoys that attract hunters. The recorder became silence that survives the hunt. We reconstruct her moves in sequence. A week before the murder, her pattern shifts by millimeters. The 212 silences extend to 20 minutes twice. At 3:03, her smart bulbs pulse a single cycle outside the usual routine. On paper, artifacts. In practice, a signal to a secondary node. She's ready to move the core. 2 days later, she checks the storage unit at an hour she never uses, removes a small hard case that fits the recorder profile, and leaves behind the twin pouch with the symbol burned inside. That burn wasn't nostalgia, it was a lure. She schedules the repair shop order under her earliest alias pattern, not to fix anything, but to put the cable in a predictable place for surveillance. If the broker watches her, the movement reads as desperation. If the broker doesn't, the shop record becomes a breadcrumb investigators can verify. Either route, someone follows. She wants that. Flush the broker. Force a meet. Confirm the market still runs diamond policy in this city. Her goal wasn't to surrender proof. It was to trade it. She believed the device's contents, voices ordering a sanctioned killing, could buy her removal from the ledger. In her calculus, a clean handover at the right table would convert policy into negotiation. The flaw is that she mistook leverage for immunity. Organizations like hers don't trade away deterrence. They pay for keys. They punish to publish a rule. We see her staging intelligence. The obsolete cable appears in her orbit 3 times in 1 week, as if she's clumsy. She isn't. Each public appearance is a camera trap. The cafe sighting, the hardware store aisle, the parking lot meet we filmed from 3 angles. She wants to map who approaches the cable and how quickly word travels from sighting to contact. That timeline tells her who is broker grade and who is rumor. She moves the recorder through a channel no one respects, a church donation bin with a cracked lid collected by a volunteer who sorts electronics for a resale shop that wipes devices with kindness instead of software. The hard case nests inside a box labeled kitchen. From there, a reseller pulls it, finds it obsolete, and tosses it into a backroom drawer with cables that don't fit anything modern. She didn't hide it in a vault. She hid it in incompetence. Sometimes the safest place is the one no professional will search. Her parallel plan included a meeting she never kept. Our recovered notes show a time written as 4:19 beside a circle and 3 diamonds, her shorthand for a neutral ground. She intended to present the cable, not the device, with a demand. Stand down the bounty, clear the ledger, receive a copy when I say so. She planned to hold the core until she saw proof of policy shifted. It reads, smart in a vacuum. It fails against doctrine. Policy doesn't shift under pressure. It hardens. So the crew answered with two gestures. First, cable, diamond, okay to the broker. A receipt of bait acquired. Second, the demonstration at her house, a sermon on skin. Miscalculation isn't just bad timing. It's misreading motive. The network doesn't want data more than deterrence. They want fear that lasts. A recording can travel, yes. A body with a mark travels faster inside a small world that listens only to itself. Her message to herself was stubborn hope. She believed a careful trade could buy peace. That hope shaped her behavior the last week. Short, neutral texts that read like cues to a watcher, not comfort to a spouse. A metronome tap on the 911 call that said, I'm still fluent, I'm still here, I'm still operating. It's heartbreaking because it's competent. Competence in the wrong moral ecology becomes a blade turned inward. The cost lands where she never meant it to. He became the message board. The crew wrote an ending on him so she would read it. The cable she dangled flushed the broker, yes. It also blinded her to the collateral they were about to claim. She prepared for a meeting. They prepared a memo. Both plans ran on time. Only one counted. What remains is the part she couldn't control, the device still out there, breathing quietly in a drawer behind thrift store appliances, waiting for the right hands to open the door. She tried to buy safety with a key. They answered with governance. And governance, in their world, is written in quiet tools and loud scars. We don't return to the same room. Pattern is her sedative, so we change the chairs in the angle, the light. On the table, 4 photographs, the symbol, the cable, the broker in profile, and a page from her storage ledger with the diamond in the margin. No preamble. The recorder clicks, and silence does the introduction. We're past the outline, I say. Now we test the story against the pattern. I slide the first photo across, the carved diamond. She looks past it, not at it. Controlled blindness. You're asking me to react, she says. I'm asking you to recognize, I answer. Recognition isn't an admission. It's a beginning. We present the map, symbol on skin, failed upload, repair ticket for a legacy cable, the broker's dead drop, the handler's testimony that a device exists with leadership voices. Each piece is dry, no flourish. Her pupils tighten at voices, not fear, calculation. She's measuring distance between what we know and what she still thinks she can hold. Offers simple, I say. Controlled immunity on obstruction and accessory after the fact, contingent on full cooperation, delivery of the device, map of the network, and identification of the broker. She exhales through her nose. You can't immunize me from them. No one can. But we can cut the rope around your throat so you can talk. Then the wedge. We play the 911 audio, stitched with the acoustic analysis. The tap rides under her voice. 3-beat, pause, 3-beat, pause. I keep my eyes on the waveform, not on her. You sent a second conversation, I say. Who is the audience? She rubs a thumb against her palm, tiny, grounding. I have anxious habits. I nod. Anxious habits don't align to a handler's cadence. The word handler lands. She blinks once. You found him, she says. Not a question. He lived, I say. The room compresses. We bring the timeline tight. Your car idled at 6:54 on the side street. 3 minutes, not a recruiter. We trace the tower. You were near the broker's sector overlap. You were waiting for a go or a no. Silence. She studies the cable photo. You're going to say I hired them. No, I answer. I'm going to say you underestimated policy. You dangled the key. They answered with the sermon. Her breath shifts. If I give you everything, you can't protect anyone who ever sat near me. We can't protect everyone, I say. We can protect targets we can name and move. She looks at the recorder. Turn it off. It stays on. She nods once. Then this is on your tape. I knew a window was closing. I knew a call was coming. I didn't know the hour. But you knew the week, I say. She doesn't deny it. I push the photograph of the broker forward. Name. She stares at the unremarkable profile. We called her Yellow. Real name. She never gave one. Contacts. A man who wears devotion like a shirt. He plays family to corpses. You're describing the blade. No, she says. I'm describing the person who cleans up after sermons. Different job. Where's the device? I ask. Her mouth tilts, not a smile. Safe. Define safe. Uninteresting. I let the quiet hold. You moved it before the murder, I say. You left the pouch to pull heat. You offered the cable to confirm the market. You planned a trade. She swallows. I planned an exchange. Trade implies equal value. Nothing equals a rule. She finally says it. I was wrong. We step into specifics. List the dead drops you used and the ones you suspect they use now. She speaks in coded landmarks. Blue bins behind the old mission after rain. A third machine from the door when it rattles its spin. Park bathrooms with broken soap dispensers. We map them in real time. Patterns bloom like veins. She names one we already watch. 2 we don't. Yellow hates cameras, she says. She picks places where memory is busy and attention is brief. I put the handler's line on the table. Retrieve the recorder or erase you. She flinches at erase. Standing order, she says. You don't get promoted off it, just less hungry. Who hired the blade? Yellow doesn't hire. She offers the work, sets the windows, vets the tools. Money flows from a stripe above her. Names, I say. She shakes her head. Letters, 2 at a time. R and L, K and P. Change them, they still mean the same thing. We circle back to the husband. Why didn't you move him? She stares at the table seam. Because moving is a flare. Because I thought I could set a meet before the sermon. Because routines once built feel like walls. He liked the walls. Her voice almost breaks unliked. Then it's flat again. I told myself I wouldn't trade his life for a recording. I told myself they wouldn't make me do that math. She breathes. Policy did the math for me. Conditional. Confession, I say. You'll name the broker. You'll give the map. You'll take us to the device. She nods once. With a condition. Relocate the nurse 2 doors down. Move the co-worker who brings me receipts to sign. Quiet. No headlines. Agreed, I say. We can move too. We can't move the city. Say it on tape, I add. She looks at the recorder as if it's a small, cruel god, then at the cable photo, then at the symbol. The broker is called Yellow, she says. She meets Mondays, first light, behind the terminal snack counter. She uses a pouch with a burn inside. She paid for a cable and wanted a door. I still hold the door. We stand. The algorithm is broken enough. With corroboration, we move for coordinated takedowns. She presses her palms flat to the table, then lifts them, leaving no prints. You won't catch leadership, she says softly. You'll bruise them. Bruises show, I say. In our world, sometimes that's enough to slow a hand. She doesn't nod. She doesn't argue. She watches the door, listening for footsteps we both know are already on the way. Parallel raids run on discipline. We stagger clocks, suppress chatter, and let the map do the talking. At 4:07, a quiet team ghosts into the co-working suite the broker rotates through, neutral carpet, generic art, a receptionist who never asks real names. At 4:12, another unit sets on a brownstone that houses 3 renters and 1 ghost identity. At 4:19, behind the terminal snack counter, a gloved hand removes a liner from a bin that looks like any other trash. Inside, a taped box. The routine breaks. We close. The office is smaller than her footprint suggested. 1 desk, 1 laptop powered down and cool. A drawer with labeled pouches, tools, spare, clean. We seize the pouch with the faint, heat-burnished symbol inside and a microfiber cloth that smells like the industrial cleaner we already know. 2 burners sit in a cereal box with the flaps tucked, screens dark, storage salted with an overwrite pattern. Even salted, residuals whisper. Compressed voice notes under 10 seconds. Lists of 3 items: cable, wipe, drop, like miniature creeds. At the brownstone, we hit a room lined with pegboard. Hooks hold nothing. The gaps outline a kit that travels: cord reels, gloves, blade wraps. In a hamper, a cloth carrying the same industrial scent and a tan synthetic fiber that matches budget car interiors. The blade's safe house is too clean. Clean is evidence. We take carpet cores, pipe threads, a strip from the inside seam of a hoodie. On the stove, a pot simmers water and cleaner, a quick dissolve for proteins. He's done this boil before. Back at the terminal, the box in the bin is light. We open it under a hood. A cable? No. An adapter. A battery. A note with 5 words. Device burned, audio partial. Sorry. It's theater written in small script. We lift latent prints from the tape's underside. 2 partials align with the broker's profile, 1 smudged loop, likely the courier's. We let the courier walk. We want the meat. The broker arrives on schedule, not expecting intercept. She moves with practiced average, eyes down, shoulders narrow, pace that never invites memory. When she reaches into the bin and finds nothing, she doesn't pivot or panic. She adjusts her scarf and sits, hands on knees, waiting. Careful, not brave. We approach with a sandwich of process: warrant, identification, calm voice. She looks at the papers like they're weather. "I don't know that company," she says softly. "You know all of them," I answer. She decides not to run. Running is noise. She hates noise. The blade doesn't wait to be surprised. He smells it earlier. Units moving before dawn, a quiet street that feels watched. He leaves through the back, crosses fences with the body memory of someone who has done this in old neighborhoods. 2 blocks down, he slips into a car that isn't his, the tan upholstery we've been tracing, and drives a route that avoids license plate readers, hugging rail spurs and alleys. We split pursuit, 1 car to shadow, 1 to cut lanes. He checks his side mirror, not for faces, but for gaps. His mind is still counting. We spike him at a light where construction narrows lanes to 1. He doesn't ram. Ramming is messy. He steps out with empty hands, gaze flat, breath even. We don't talk to him in the street. We let the cuff click and the car hum and the morning widen around him like nothing happened. At the precinct, his silence is whole. We don't need his voice to build the chain. Evidence is the confession. Burner phones in the broker's office carry wipe scars and 1 surviving audio. Window closes at 19. Use comfort entry. Retrieve cable, pouch, log. Her ledgers map payments, prepaid reloads that align to our micro-deposit clusters. Ritual photos in a binder show small marks carved on skin, each with a date, each with a ledger line. That binder is policy printed. The fiber from the blade's grip matches cord we seized from the brownstone closet and the paracord fuzz lodged in the knot mouths at our scene. On his boot, a grain of driveway grit with a compound ratio that matches the coarser aggregate used on the victim's street. In his trunk, a cloth wrap stained with cleaner and a blade with replaceable edges. 1 edge carries micro residue of the victim's blood. He did not souvenir. He kept tools until the next sermon. We put the 2 of them in separate rooms and move the map between them. The broker breaks first because careful people crack when the routine collapses. She wants to save years, not face a statute that stacks. She outlines orders in euphemism. Disputes. Corrections. She diagrams how jobs move. Request up, window set, tool assigned, kit issued, fee posted. She says the symbol is clarity. She names no leadership, Only initials and ports. The blade doesn't confess. He allows inventory. That's mine. That's not. He looks at the photo of the carving and says nothing. His silence is allegiance. It doesn't matter. The chain holds without his words. We have the cleaner signature, the fiber match, the ledger timing, the pouch with the brand inside, the old cards, the micro deposits, the dead drop cadence. Taken together, they are speech. The end of the symbol in this city won't be an end. It will be a bruise that shows. But the ledger of sermons gets new annotations. Photos tie prior victims to deserter punishment, marks as governance, not passion. We write an answer in our ink. Warrants, seizures, arrests. The broker's web tears. The blade's hand stops. Which brings us back to her. Justice lands hard, but not whole. The question now is where she stands when the dust settles and what price the device will still demand. Courtroom language turns sermons into statutes. We charge the broker with conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation, money laundering, and participation in an enterprise engaged in violent retaliation. The blade faces first-degree murder with special circumstance enhancements, torture, message motive, and killing in furtherance of organized crime. The indictment recites facts like anchors, micro-deposits, prepaid reloads, dead drops, the pouch with the burn, the fiber match, the cleaner signature, the carving sequence. The wife doesn't sit at the defense table. She sits at a separate conference table with two realities stacked, accessory by omission and obstruction by deceit versus cooperation that unlock the network map, the dead drops, the broker's cadence, and the blade's kit. Prosecutors posture hard, then pivot to leverage. They offer a structured plea, plead to obstruction, testify on the mechanism and motive, surrender the device, and enter witness protection with strict compliance. She signs because policy already took everything else. In hearings, the ritual photos matter. Jurors don't need gore, they need governance. Each image shows a small mark, dated and ledgered, detached from passion. The expert explains, this is a signature inside a policy, not a fetish. The psychologist anchors motive, punishment as organizational calculus. The ledger lines and bank clusters land like metronome ticks. The story becomes math. The broker's defense argues distance. She never touched a blade. She never entered a house. She isn't leadership. The ledger, the audio fragments, and the dead drop capture answer that distance is the point of brokers. She requested comfort entry. She set the window. She paid the fee. The jury hears procurement by proxy. The verdict reads guilty across counts tied to hiring, paying, and laundering. The blade says nothing and watches monitors instead of faces. His counsel attacks chain of custody. We answer with redundancy. 2 labs on the fiber, independent confirmation of the cleaners, compound ratio, gate analysis matched to ATM vestibule footage, and the thermostat log aligning to his known timeline. The jury sees adherence, not doubt. They convict on the core, first-degree murder with enhancements. Sentencing reflects 2 truths. The broker gets decades, stacked terms for conspiracy, solicitation, and laundering. The blade receives life without parole. The court names the act what it was, a retaliation killing designed to communicate control. The ritual is recognized as part of the crime, not color around it. That matters for precedent. It also matters for the next case that arrives with a shape on skin. And the wife? She pleads to obstruction and false statements. The court hears her cooperation, weighs her omissions, and stares at the cost. A suspended custodial sentence folds into relocation and supervision. The order forbids contact with anyone named in the network map. She lives under fluorescent lights and coded mail, bound by conditions that feel like a softer cage. Accountability without celebration. The device unlock becomes a separate proceeding. Chain of custody arguments multiply because the recorder slept in a drawer no one should trust. We document the route with painful care. Recovery from the resale backroom, forensic cloning through a clean room, cable fitment under video, readout verified by dual examiners. The playback enters under a limited use order. The audio is clear enough to identify code names and a rhythm of command. It ties middle management to a sanctioned killing years ago. It does not say the names the public craves. Gaps remain because jurisdiction is a patchwork. The original homicide falls outside statutes in places where time ran out. The Enterprise case climbs only 2 rungs before the ladder disappears into fog. Shells dissolve, witnesses evaporate, initials swap like masks. The prosecutor calls it a partial dismantling. The network calls it a bruise. Both are right. Bruises slow hands, they don't end them. Civil court opens another lane. The victim's family files a wrongful death suit against the broker's shells and any assets reachable through the ledger trail. A judge freezes accounts tied to micro-deposit clusters. It's not closure, it's redistribution. Money that would have paid future sermons pays into a trust. That too is law. Public safety orders ripple outward. Notices go to agencies near ports. Dead drops we mapped get welded shut, cleaned, monitored. Clinics receive quiet alerts about injuries that look like ritual. Patrol briefings include a slide, small geometric marks as governance. Cops trained to hear domestic become trained to hear doctrine. Some lives will bend away from a blade because a memo changed. Policy questions outlive the case. Do you criminalize a survivor's concealment when concealment is her survival algorithm? Do you widen immunity when testimony is the only key? The court splits the difference. Accountability calibrated by cooperation. It's imperfect, necessary. The motive was policy. The counter is policy too. The last gap lives where the symbol grew, inside an organization that adapts. Leadership stays out of reach, insulated by compartments she once ran through. The lesson for you is simple. Law can name the broker. Law can cage the blade. Law can move a witness. It cannot yet write a statute that erases a sermon from a culture that still rewards obedience, which leaves us with a city still listening for footsteps and a woman whose survival skills now read as evidence. Justice is partial. The past keeps breathing. And the metronome somewhere still taps. Now let's open the box. We recover the recorder from the resale backroom, document every handoff, and seat it in a clean room cradle. The obsolete cable clicks in with a stubborn fit, like bone set back in place. Power rises, the screen flickers, the time code stares back, 4 digits, a colon, and a heartbeat. We press play, and the past breathes. The first sounds aren't words, wind over water, a gull's thin cry, then footsteps on wood that isn't a dock but an indoor walkway, hollow, regular, controlled. Voices enter in fragments. A man with a clipped cadence says, "Policy stands." Another answers with a question masked as respect. On who? The leader doesn't say a name. He says a letter pair, consistent with the handler's account. R and L. Then, diamond policy. The phrase is calm, practiced, not an idea, a procedure. She recorded from a distance that suggests a vent or grating. The mic picks the frame's rattle when heavier boots pass. Someone sets down a metal case. Latch clicks, paper slides, a chair scrapes, then a second voice, smooth, administrative, summarizes the grievance. Numbers wrong, collections messy, whispers of disloyalty. The leader asks, "Public?" The administrator says, "Contained." The leader pauses. "Make it travel." That's the order. No rage, no heat, just cold calculation. A new sound enters. Plastic unwrapped, a blade removed from paper, the kind used later for the mark. The instruction arrives as geometry, not poetry. Top, side, notch, last. You hear the blade tap its own handle 3 times. Ritual rhythm. The same internal metronome our blade carried years later. Continuity is the proof. The doctrine didn't evolve. It persisted. Voices lower as someone enters distressed. A young man says, "I did what you said." He's trying to negotiate merit. The leader cuts him off gently. "Work clean next time." Then to someone else, "Bring the boy." A door opens, air changes. A foot scuffs concrete. The recorder catches a breath sharpened by fear. Then the first strike, a dull sound, not fatal. Compliance. She inhales on tape. It's small, controlled. She doesn't panic. She adjusts her grip because the mic quivers and snaps back. You can hear the survival training in the absence of noise she makes. Then comes the sermon. The leader speaks over the act, narrating policy. This is governance. This prevents rot. The administrator counts under his breath. 1, 2, 3. The hum of counting is the same cadence a survivor would later describe. The carving is not improvisation. It's recitation. The boy pleads once, using a nickname that collapses to a consonant. He's cut off by a hand over his mouth. The scrape of chair legs, the slower exhale that means someone is watching a face go slack. Post-event, the room settles, wipes, water in a bucket, a mop wrung hard. The leader asks, "Photographs?" The administrator, "Discrete circulation, same list." The list names ports without naming cities. The mind of a network protecting itself through theater. The final minute matters for chain. The administrator recaps logistics. A courier will return blade and cord. A broker will manage payment. A handler will guide lessons downstream. Then, the sentence that kept her alive long enough to run. If she heard this, retrieve the recorder or erase her. No name, just her as a category. Asset turned liability. The recording ends, not with a click, but with a scrape, as if she tucked the device deeper into fabric. We clone the audio twice, hash the files, and walk them into court wrapped in process. That keeps the door open without letting the ocean in. We can't tell a jury who, precisely, issued the order by legal name. We can tell them the order existed, that it set the ritual, that it linked message to motive. Why did it matter? Because it ties low-level violence to middle leadership with operational language. Not a hot-blooded killing, a planned correction. It shows a broker existed before this city and carried the same duties: window setting, tool returning, payment clearing. It demonstrates continuity across geography. When a network repeats itself over years, habit becomes identity. Identity becomes liability. But the fail is legal, not logical. Statutes lapsed in one jurisdiction. Names on the tape are initials, code words, ports. The leader's voice is distinct, but identity can't cross the burden alone. We get policy, we miss the person. We bruise, we don't break. The lesson lands where she lived. Leverage without timing is a blade without a handle. She held proof, thought it could buy peace, waited until routines felt like walls. Policy doesn't negotiate with walls. It writes on them. The device gives us the sermon's origin and the ritual's instruction. It gives her the validation she never needed this way. It does not return a life. So we take what the box gives: voice, cadence, doctrine. We map it to the present. We charge where we can. We note the limits. Then we pivot from mechanics to psychology, because the next question isn't who spoke in that room. It's why she kept running with a key that cut everyone she loved. Moving from mechanics to mind, her profile is adaptation under pressure. High-functioning dissociation lets her split tasks from feeling. She can stage grief and inventory a scene in the same breath. That isn't absence of empathy. It's compartmentalized empathy deployed on schedule. Control is her religion. Routines, 212 silences, identical shopping loops, fixed gym slots. Aren't quirks, they're scaffolds. The benefit, predictability, lowers cognitive load. The cost, predators hunt patterns. She mistook structure for shelter. Manipulation sits in the gray, not grand lies. Micro-curation. She chooses protectors by mirroring their values. Stability for him, competence for us. Selective vulnerability becomes a tool. Reveal enough to earn cover, never enough to expose origin. Trauma loops explain the mask. Every successful concealment rewards the next concealment. Each calm choice pushes consequences downstream. She learns the wrong lesson. Distance equals safety. In practice, distance shifts danger to the nearest attachment. Her core flaw is instrumental hope. She believes systems can be bargained with if you hold the right key. That belief powered the cable bait and the thrift store hide. It also blinded her to policy's logic. She isn't evil. She's optimized. And optimization, without reevaluating the motive environment, becomes a quiet engine for catastrophe. Across town, unaware of the doctrine behind the mark, neighbors start with casseroles and end with locks. Sympathy lasts a week. Then comes recalibration. The porch where they once borrowed sugar grows a camera lens. Motion lights click on in daylight. Conversations shorten at the curb. Grief sits there, but so does doubt. People who knew him as the man who waved from the driveway now glance at the house and adjust their route. HOA threads fill with careful language. Increased vigilance. Unusual traffic. The word unusual becomes elastic. A white sedan idling for a minute is a threat. A package placed on the wrong stoop is a test. Someone posts a screenshot of the symbol cropped from the news, then deletes it after a moderator says not to spread fear. The image still travels phone to phone. The symbol works because it moves faster than facts. Inside the victim's workplace, HR runs a briefing with a slide deck on support resources and external inquiries. The room stays quiet as people weigh questions against loyalty to a man who stayed late to help close books. A manager says, "We'll respect privacy." Someone whispers, "Whose?" Another whispers, "Did she know?" Coffees at the break room shift from casual to coded. Coworkers watch emails from unknown senders like they might be Windows. Security badges now require 2 taps to exit after hours. The building hires a guard who stands where a potted plant used to be. Her office, what's left of it, becomes a rumor site. Employees who knew her name before the story now call her that woman and speak in tones like they're sharing a ghost story. A supervisor sends a message, "We do not speculate." Speculation becomes the only currency. Someone says she had 2 phones. Someone else says she always parked 1 space from the pole. The parking lot feels like a map of secrets in retrospect. It isn't. It's a map of routines anyone could read. The victim's family absorbs grief, sharpened by betrayal. A sibling stares at a framed photo and wonders when the past walked through their door. A parent asks for details they will regret knowing, and then asks for more because details make pain feel like data. They move through a courtroom as if through an aquarium, watched, discussed, misnamed. At home, a child asks why cameras click on the sidewalk. The answer is plain and hard. Because a story with a symbol sells. Media turns the mark into shorthand. Headlines swap nuance for geometry. Diamond killing. Symbol murder. The profile and the motive flatten into shareable terms. A presenter says the word policy without explaining it. A true crime forum posts a comparison grid of small shapes cut into skin from cases 3 states away. People trace lines with fingers on screens, naming patterns they don't fully understand. In that noise, real tips hide and false leads amplify. We spend hours wading through threads that mention the shape, looking for one quietly accurate detail. A dead drop, a broker's gate, a schedule that doesn't belong. Community meetings swell, folding chairs push the fire code. Police present slides, how to report suspicious activity, what constitutes a credible threat, why ritual marks aren't urban legend. A hand raises. Are we safe? The honest answer is layered. Safer than yesterday because we named a broker and caged a blade. Not safe from the idea that made them both useful. Ideas don't ride in a single car. They ride in culture. Neighborhood watch captains talk about porch pirates with a seriousness usually reserved for storms. Someone brings up the 419 detail leaked to press. A woman checks her watch at 4:18 every day now, as if watching time can break a spell. Ritual invades routine. That's part of the harm. A mark drawn on one body can rewrite a block. Small businesses adjust. The phone repair counter that once took rice bags and questions now installs a camera over its back door and trains staff to refuse legacy cable work without ID. The co-working suite upgrades its sign-in from a clipboard to a scanner. The laundromat tapes a sign over the third machine. Out of order. It's not. The owner just doesn't want it used as a dead drop again. He doesn't know if it was, but the rumor is enough. Churches absorb secondhand fear. A pastor mentions safety in a sermon without saying mark or murder. Volunteers at donation bins check boxes with new care, turning over old electronics like they might bite. One finds a camera from the 200s and holds it up, expecting meaning. It's nothing, but the act of searching becomes a ritual of its own, a way to feel like. The city can protect itself by purging its addicts. Online, the symbol becomes a dare. Teenagers etch triangles and diamonds into notebooks to freak out friends. A teacher emails a counselor when a drawing appears on a desk. The counselor calls a parent who calls us. We triage. Not every shape is a sermon. We sort signal from noise, knowing noise still costs time. Prevention is a blunt instrument refined by repetition. We tell schools what to watch that matters, new friends with nameless histories, cash-only behavior in kids who never handled money, sudden routines that look like schedules set by someone else. Meanwhile, the city's quiet workers, mail carriers, bus drivers, janitors, become eyes. We brief them in short, clear sentences. Watch for the same car circling a route with no pickup. Note parcels with hand-drawn symbols. Report bins that collect the same small boxes on Mondays before dawn. They nod. Their maps are better than ours. They see the seams where careful people move. Ritual scars carry costs in therapy rooms too. A neighbor who saw the sheet roll past her door hears static when kitchen knives scrape a cutting board. A man who once prided himself on a predictable jog now changes routes daily, then realizes he's doing the thing he mocked, hunting patterns by creating new ones. We recommend two things: community and boundaries. Talk to each other. Don't try to solve the city in your living room. Law enforcement coordination stretches across jurisdictional lines. We send the mark's geometry to agencies near ports with a note. Small, deliberate, post-mortem, message motive. We share the dead drop map with transit police. We ask for quiet eyes on storage unit corridors at odd hours. The goal isn't to chase ghosts. It's to raise the friction coefficient. Careful people hate friction. The last ripple is inside her new name. She sits under fluorescent lights while relocation arranges an address that won't hold long. The program gives her rules. She can follow rules. But rules are a metronome, and metronomes trigger memory. In the city she left, people keep talking about the mark like it's a storm cloud, always there, sometimes raining. The thing is, storms pass. Governance like this doesn't. It adapts to umbrellas. So the neighborhood learns to live with a bruise. Doors click earlier. Lights stay on longer. People who once waved from their lawns now wave from their cameras. That isn't paranoia. It's a recalibration in a place that got a memo the hard way. The profile here isn't of a killer. It's of a community adjusting to the knowledge that some violence isn't personal. It's policy that touches your street. And once you learn that, you watch differently. So, Let's strip away the noise. This wasn't passion. It was policy. Policy doesn't feel. It functions. When an organization fears defection more than discovery, it codifies cruelty. It writes rules in flesh so that memory travels faster than any memo. The symbol is the governance, a brand that carries instructions without context. You don't need a signature when geometry can serve as authority. That mark says, "We don't negotiate with escape." It says, "There is one cost for disobedience, paid by anyone close enough to feel it." The marriage wasn't a sanctuary, it was leverage. Love became a lever to pry open compliance, to make sure she could read the rule without pretending it was a rumor. We saw this in the tape. The leader's voice never raised. The phrase, "diamond policy," landed like a calendar entry. Then, geometry as instruction, top, side, notch, last. That order wasn't whim, it was doctrine. Years later, across a different city, the blade recited the same cadence in silence. Continuity is motive. The punishment is messaging. The aim isn't to clear a personal grudge, it's to calibrate a community of offenders by fear. Why use the husband? Because intimate targets scale deterrence. If you can't catch the fugitive, you take the person she chose for safety and show him as evidence that safety is an illusion. Pain becomes a public memo. The body carries the policy. Neighbors whisper, forums speculate. The symbol does the rest. It's a broadcast that requires no press release. Think about this like a currency system. A legitimate state punishes to reinforce laws. An illicit enterprise punishes to reinforce loyalty. Both rely on predictability. The network's predictability is mechanical, defect, and the mark follows. Not always immediately, not always where expected, but inevitably enough to train behavior. Compliance purchased through dread. This reframing also explains the broker's portfolio. She didn't curate passion crimes. She scheduled compliance events. Invoices turned pain into ledger entries, dead drops into supply chains, blades into contractors. If you view each job as a unit of governance, the ledgers read like a policy manual. Comfort entry. Window closes. Tools returned. Administrative language wrapped around harm, so the machine can run without moral friction. The wife misread the function and the audience. She tried to trade in data, believing proof of a sanctioned killing could balance the scale. But in a system where punishment is policy, proof is less valuable than fear. Data exposes individuals. Fear disciplines populations. The organization always pays for the latter first. So the cable was worth less than the sermon. The recorder, dangerous as it was, still couldn't compete with a ritual that turns any home into a courtroom. That's why the mark's shape matters. It's simple, reproducible, and legible across time. Not an artist's flourish, but a stamp. The blade could be swapped, the port could change, the broker could dissolve and reappear with a new LLC letterhead, but the symbol binds them. It says the order came from above, even if above never shows its face. That's how you govern without office doors. You standardize the scar. Policy also explains restraint. No ransacking for trophies, no sloppy declarations, just the steps: compliance, control, inscription, retrieval. The removal list, cable, pouch, quick log, served the secondary motive, but it never overshadowed the primary one. You don't leave jewelry to prove you're not a thief unless theft isn't your objective. You leave it because you want investigators, neighbors, and the fugitive to see the one thing you chose to take, and the one thing you chose to leave behind on skin. If this sounds cold, it's because the profile demands it. The crew discourages improvisation because improvisation threatens the brand. Passion creates variance. Variance creates doubt. Doubt weakens deterrence. So the broker builds checklists, the blade follows phases, and leadership only needs to speak in letters and geometry. This is the enterprise of punishment, where violence is a governance tool as standardized as a stamp on official paper. Now, Consider the husband's last week through this lens. Strange gifts. A playing card marked with the symbol. Those weren't taunts. They were notices. Policy doesn't arrive unannounced. It announces itself in small, deniable ways, so the fear begins before the act. That prelude does work for them. He searched for stalker signs. He changed his behavior. The net didn't close because of those searches. The searches were the net tightening inside his head. Punishment as policy recruits the victim to participate in his own surveillance. What could have changed the outcome? Earlier recognition of policy cues, not just crime cues. Treat the symbol not as a theatrical flourish, but as jurisdiction, illicit jurisdiction. That means faster cross-border coordination, immediate elevation of ritual to enterprise-level scrutiny, and reclassification of odd signals, metronome taps, coded mailboxes, as operational, not eccentric. When you treat policy like policy, you respond with counter-policy. You disrupt ledgers, not just chase blades. This reframing also clarifies why the device mattered and didn't. As evidence, the recorder could bruise the network, implicate middle layers, tighten nets around brokers. But, as governance, the symbol circulation did more daily work than any file ever could. She held leverage. They held doctrine. She planned a trade. They issued a memo. In that conflict, doctrine tends to win the first round. The motive, then, isn't hatred of her. It's fear of what she represents, a precedent for exit, a leak in the hull. Organizations like this survive by managing precedent. Let one person leave with proof and live. Others start asking what proof they need to buy their freedom. So the policy answers bluntly. There is no proof sufficient. There is no trade equal. There is only return or ruin, and ruin doesn't have to hit you to be effective. Which brings us to you, the listener mapping risk. If you see marks like this, her language like policy attached to punishment, or find networks where brokers outnumber bruisers, you're not looking at random violence. You're looking at governance without a flag. And the counter is to widen the lens. Don't ask only, who swung? Ask, who benefits from the sermon? Who maintains the brand? Who funds the ledger that pays for fear? The husband's murder wasn't a private tragedy alone. It was a public act with a private stage. The audience was everyone she ever knew, and everyone still inside the network who might be tempted to follow her path. That's the cruelty and the calculus. And until policy meets policy, law with enough reach and enough speed, the symbol will keep traveling. The goal is simple. Make the next sermon too expensive to schedule. Now, let's pivot from motive to prevention. If punishment is policy, then survival depends on reading policy cues early and responding with counter-policy, not just fear. Consider this your checklist: practical, unglamorous, and built to raise friction for careful predators. Start with pattern recognition. Don't chase big anomalies. Weigh small consistencies around them. A single misdelivered package is noise. 3 misdirected envelopes over 2 weeks, each corrected by the same unknown caller, is a probe. 1 false delivery attempt is random. 2 on the same weekday, in the same hour, with a driver who waves off signature, is mapping. Predators test stability before they strike. If you log minor oddities and they line up in a grid, same day, same hour, same corner, treat it as a system, not a coincidence. Disclosure comes next. Concealed pasts don't stay sealed. They compound risk. If a partner carries fugitive-level history, aliases, crews, outstanding debts, you don't need every detail to act. You need enough to trigger safeguards. Disclosure isn't confession theater. It's operational clarity. If they can't name the danger, they can't help you build routines that aren't traps. Silence turns loved ones into blind flanks, and policy hunts blind flanks first. Law enforcement coordination has to move faster across borders. Ritual marks should cross jurisdictions like Amber Alerts. When a geometric signature shows up, agencies near ports and rail hubs need the same slide deck within hours, not weeks. Share the dead drop map. Share the broker cadence. Share the ATM vestibule footage markers, gait, posture, the pre-exit wrist tap. You're not looking for one face, you're mapping a method. The method repeats even when the names change. Tech hygiene is its own front. Ghost apps matter. So do dead zones. If a phone's metadata shows consistent silences at oddly precise times, 2:12 every night, ask why. Scheduled power cycles are one explanation. Coded comms are another. Smart devices that blip on and off outside normal routines can be beacons, tiny flags that say, "I'm home," or "I've moved the piece." Audit your network. Logs. Look for device wake patterns that don't serve a human habit. The mind is a locked box. Your Wi-Fi is the table it sits on. If the table shakes at the same minute every night, someone's knocking. Community reporting should treat odd as data, not drama. Train your neighborhood watch to note consistencies. Cars idling at fixed times in rotating spots. A hooded figure scouting sightlines on 4 separate evenings. Metronome-like tapping heard in a hallway when a door opens. Don't chase shadows. Document rhythms. 2 sentences can change a case. Same sedan, same corner. Mondays at 4:19. That's usable intelligence. Vague fear isn't. For families, build routines that resist reading. Vary departure routes and times by real randomness, not fake variety. Predators learn your Monday loop faster than you do. Introduce small, irregular shifts, alternate parking surfaces, shift gym days, swap grocery aisles. The goal isn't paranoia, it's entropy. Careful people hate entropy. It breaks their counting. If you operate under an alias, you need a plan to sunset it cleanly. Stack identities only as long as each serves a precise purpose, then archive with documentation. Alias sprawl is how you forget which gym scanned which ID and which lease ties to which P.O. box. Forgetfulness is a breadcrumb trail. Keep a private ledger that will make sense to a third party if you can't speak. If the day comes when you must disclose, you want to disclose coherently, not in shock. Businesses can harden without theater. Co-working suites should authenticate beyond clipboards, log printer usage to temporary accounts, and rotate camera angles around mail nooks and shared trash bins that function as dead drop magnets. Laundromats can vary machine cycles in software, so the third from the door never hums on a schedule. Hardware stores can flag bulk purchases of industrial cleaner and paracord within 24 hours of prepaid reloads at nearby kiosks. None of this is a silver bullet. It's grit in the gears. For investigators, elevate ritual early. If a mark is simple, reproducible, and appears post-mortem with staged restraint, treat it as governance. Escalate to enterprise units immediately. Don't isolate it as weirdness. Weirdness is often continuity wearing a mask. Push subpoenas to janitorial supply distributors when you see industrial cleaner signatures paired with paracord fuzz. Track prepaid reloads in clusters around micro-deposit spikes. Map dead drops to noisy places with low memory, bus terminals, thrift bins, third washers. That's where brokers breathe. Media has a role in prevention without feeding panic. Avoid turning the symbol into a mascot. Report its function. Policy, not mystique. Share actionable patterns. Monday morning bin pickups, comfort entry windows around evening noise basins, the practical tools used. Rubberized, short-handled compliance implements, replaceable edge blades, janitorial wipes. When audiences understand mechanics, they can see precursors. When they only see the logo, they either gawk or copy. If you're the person with leverage, a device, a recording, a ledger, don't wage your own policy war. Leverage without infrastructure is a live wire in your pocket. Timing matters, custodian matters. A controlled handoff to a unit with cross-jurisdiction reach beats any private negotiation. The organization you're bargaining with doesn't pay for peace. It pays for precedent. Your idea of a trade is their excuse for a sermon. On the street level, train the quiet workers. Mail carriers can log recurring misaddressed envelopes on a block. Bus drivers can spot the same person hovering near bins on fixed days. Warehouse security can note breaker flips that buy sensor blindness. Give them a single point of contact and a short list. Repeat cars, repeat times, repeat gestures. Make reporting low friction. Careful people exploit friction. For households, create a dissonance drill. Once a week, each adult lists one thing that didn't fit. An unlocked gate, a light that flicked at an odd hour, a package with handwriting that didn't match its alleged sender. Put them on a calendar. If 3 land on the same day, tighten your loop. Vary routes. Invite a friend over for the next 2 evenings. Call your local liaison. Most weeks, it's nothing. The week it isn't, you'll be ahead of the curve. Finally, stop confusing calm with safety. She sounded calm on the 911 call because calm was her algorithm. Algorithms don't equal control, they equal habit. If someone you love manages everything with quiet precision, ask what burden that precision is carrying. The truth might be survivable now. The secret later might not be. The blind spot here wasn't a missed scream. It was the belief that danger announces itself in volume. It rarely does. It announces itself in counts and cadences. 3 taps, 2 deposits, 1 pouch, Monday at first light. Prevention starts when you hear the metronome under the noise and decide to break its rhythm. As the door closed behind her, we believed the map was complete. But the real question is, what did the house keep saying that we ignored? So we walk it again, deliberate, slow, listening for the metronome under the drywall. Start with the 911 call's tap. 3 beats, pause. 3 beats, pause. Acoustic analysis tied it to a cadence. But inside the home, a physical source existed. In the kitchen, beneath the quartz, the underslung sink had a magnetic soap pump with a loose spring. Tap the counter above the pump, and you get a hollow triplet through the cabinetry. She didn't invent a code. She used the house like an instrument and assumed the watcher knew the song. That tells you 2 things. 1, she expected an audience beyond dispatch. 2, she believed the tap would reassure someone waiting outside that she was still operating, not unraveling. The misdirected mail reads, "Different now." We dismissed. 3 envelopes returned to sender with a scribble on the label as clerical error. Look closely. The handwriting isn't postal. It matches the ledger script from her storage unit. Rounded R's, narrow A's. Those envelopes weren't mistakes. They were tests. Misaddressed means, does this address still belong to you? A watcher logged the returns and confirmed stability. We ignored the handwriting as background. It was confirmation that the net was already measuring the house. The card with the symbol looked theatrical, a single playing card left on the mat. We cataloged it, photographed it, moved on. We didn't weigh the manufacturing date. Under magnification, the cardstock shows a pre-redesigned back pattern from a run discontinued years ago, the same era as the original recorder. That isn't coincidence, it's continuity. Someone reached back to an old inventory so the message matched origin. To her, that would read as policy, not freestyling. To us, it should have read as doctrine inbound. We treated it as a taunt. It was a notice period. Inside the living room, the rug slide looked like a scuff from responders moving through. Under infrared, the nap recorded a shallow arc consistent with cautious foot placement. Weight on the outside of the foot, not heel-toe. That's not panic, that's professional. The arc aligns with the path from door to hallway taken during comfort entry. We missed it because our first pass prioritized the blood map over the tread map. Action bias blinded us. The truth was worse. The offender rehearsed inside her architecture without rushing. We ignored small bulbs. The smart lights pulsed once at 3:03 on 2 nights before the murder. We flagged device cycling and moved on, but the kitchen undercabinet strip light has a physical dimmer. The set screw showed a fresh micro scratch that aligns with fingernail size, not screwdriver width. She signaled manually at least once. If you're looking for an accomplice, that's noise. If you're looking for a watcher, that's a lighthouse. Her fluency wasn't only digital. She made the house speak in low, analog pulses that our eyes skimmed past. At the threshold, the strike plate bore one hairline mark, too clean for burglary, too subtle for accident. The width matches a short, rubberized wedge used for comfort entries, the same tool class the broker's notes reference. We called the door unforced because the lock never failed. It was bypassed. That distinction is everything. Unforced invites domestic suspicion. Bypassed points to tradecraft. Our language mattered. It led us down the wrong corridor for 12 hours. The neighbor's report landed as noise in our notes. A low, steady clicking at 4:19. We wrote it off as HVAC. The return vent in the hallway carries a warped slat that vibrates at specific airflow. When the thermostat hits a fresh cycle, it ticks twice. On the night in question, the smart thermostat shows a manual adjustment 2 minutes before the report. Someone set airflow to trigger the tick at 4:19. Why? Because 4:19 is her shorthand for neutral ground. She turned the house into a clock that struck once at the hour the crew watches. We were listening for heavy footsteps. They were listening for a vent. The garage offered a mute clue. On the workbench, a jar of degreaser sat next to a stack of microfiber cloths, all common. But the top cloth carried a faint print from a small blade handle. Not her usual kitchen knives, not his tools. The print width matches replaceable edge utility blades from the seized pouch. That cloth didn't leave the scene with the kit. It stayed, absorbed, dried, and looked like cleaning. It was the fingerprint of a supply chain moving through their home while staying in character. Her vocabulary kept whispering origin. In her first interview, she said, "He's been unsettled." Not scared. Unsettled is a handler's word. Movement without destination. We had a window. Not opportunity. Window is scheduling. They won't adapt to this neighborhood. They adapt. Neighborhood. It's network language wearing domestic clothes. We heard grief and filtered for sincerity. We should have filtered for code slipping through habit. We also overlooked negative space. Valuables untouched drew our eyes. Items missing looked random, a small safe, a pouch. But the most telling absence was the quick log. In her storage unit, she kept ledger lines, dates, initials, small symbols. In the house, a whiteboard near the back door showed shopping lists and reminders. Cleaned, of course. But the magnet placement left faint rectangular shadows, a habit of pinning a smaller card dead center. That card is missing. The outline matches the throwaway index cards we later found in her unit with M-style shorthand. She pinned her private metronome in the open, then pulled it. Our photos show the clean white where dust should be. Absence is evidence. We filed the whiteboard as domestic. It was a dial. We dismissed the false delivery attempts as courier sloppiness. Ring footage from a neighbor's cam, when stabilized, shows the driver never glancing at the house number. He watched the reflection in the storm door glass, scanning the interior line for movement. Twice, his hand hovered over the knob, then withdrew when a hallway light brightened. He wasn't lost. He was running a sightline test tied to the house's internal rhythms. We captured his plate, too late to tie him to the broker's shell routes while they were fresh. Finally, the sound we misread. In the 911 call, beyond the tap and the breath, a faint metallic rasp. We chalked it up to the dish rack. Back in the kitchen, we aligned the handset path with countertop appliances. The rasp lines up with the greater drawer's loose rail, which rattles when the drawer sits 2 millimeters proud. That happens if someone rushed it closed, not a spouse getting dinner. A stranger setting tools, using her kitchen as a staging surface, sliding a drawer without caring about alignment. It's a small disrespect that we should have felt. We didn't, because we were triaging trauma. Which brings us to the principle. The first clue is always hidden in plain sight. We had the metronome. We had the cardstock run. We had the door's bypass mark. We had the whiteboard's ghost. We had language that didn't belong to this life. Each told the same story. Policy at the door, fluency inside, a message sent through architecture. Next time, treat houses like witnesses. Listen to their habits, not just their blood. Because when governance moves through a home, it hums. And if you train your ear, you'll hear it before it carves. The profile is clear. Survival strategies can calcify into liabilities. She built a life on precision, timed silences, mirrored empathy, controlled narratives. Those tools worked until they became predictable. The very routines that lowered her fear raised the offender's certainty. Think about this as a locked box. She hardened the lid, but she advertised the hinges. The motive teaches scale. Punishment grew from personal threat into organizational policy. When fear of defection exceeds fear of exposure, doctrine wins. The symbol did more than brand a victim. It standardized meaning across crews and cities. That's how a quiet order in one room turned into a ritual downstream. The mark was both signature and statute. Method matters because it reveals the machine. Comfort entry. Restraint without frenzy. Inscription last. Retrieval of tokens tied to leverage. The choreography repeats because repetition is the point. For the network, variance is risk. For you, variance is often the tell. When you see violence that looks rehearsed, you're not looking at impulse, you're looking at governance. The cost is the moral core. Secrets don't just burden the keeper, they redistribute danger. She believed distance would protect her husband. Distance protected no one. It rerouted harm along intimate lines. In that calculus, love became a liability managed by policy. The lesson for any concealed past is stark. If you can't name the threat, you can't build guardrails for the people inside your orbit. Consider prevention reframed as counter-policy. Early recognition of ritual cues, symbols, cadence, staged restraint must trigger enterprise-level response, not neighborhood rumor. Cross-jurisdiction speed is a force multiplier. Broker ecosystems live in the gaps between agencies. Coordination closes oxygen. You don't win by catching lone blades. You win by disrupting logistics, dead drops, payment vectors, cleaner supply, cable demand. The digital trail is a teacher. Ghost apps, device wake patterns, and scheduled silences are not curiosities. They are habit fingerprints. In our case, the 212 metronome and 303 pulse were supposed to be invisible. They weren't. If your home network keeps time you didn't set, someone else is counting. The thing is, careful offenders fear entropy. Introduce entropy into your routines, and you raise their cost of doing business. On the investigative side, elevate houses as witnesses. Architecture carries narrative. Door strikes that whisper bypass, vents that tick on command, whiteboards that ghost missing cards. Blood tells one story. Dust and rhythm tell another. Train for both, because doctrine doesn't always shout. It hums. The device taught us a final, uncomfortable truth. Leverage without timing is almost indistinguishable from bait. She held proof powerful enough to bruise a network, but she misread doctrine's priority. Fear outperforms files. When you negotiate with an enterprise that monetizes deterrence, you're bargaining with a weather system. You don't move it with a single umbrella. What then is actionable? 3 anchors. First, classify ritualized harm as policy and move cases into enterprise lanes on day 1. Second, treat brokers as infrastructure. Follow money, cadence, and convenience, not charisma. Third, don't mistake calm for control. Calm can be an algorithm masking collapse. For communities, the takeaway isn't panic, it's literacy. When you see a city adjust, locks, lights, small shifts in path, it's a population learning policies reach and building friction. That friction saved tips, slowed hands, and forced errors that evidence could catch. Not heroics, habits. For her, the end state is a quieter cage with rules she can finally admit exist. For leadership that stayed out of frame, the bruise is real. Bruises make hands cautious. Caution slows sermons. Slower sermons save lives. The first clue is always hidden in plain sight. In this case, it was a small shape, a metronome tap, a door that never broke because it didn't need to. The profile told us who. The motive told us why. The method told us how. Together, they taught the only lesson that matters in work like this. If you learn to hear the cadence beneath the noise, you can intervene before policy reaches your kitchen table. She sits under fluorescent lights, hands still, while the symbol fades from her skin and settles into the city's memory. If you want more deep dives into the criminal mind, subscribe now. Let me know in the comments, what psychological flaw led to this killer's downfall? Watch the next case where a staged accident unravels into a silent war between two families.